talking fast, not a pause in sight. Leanie's got my head in a spin tonight. Oh, shut up, Leanie, can't you see? You talk so much, it's drowning me. With your white hair and sassy flair, just give me a breath, let me share. Podcast queen with a wicked smile, running jokes mile after mile. Try to speak, but in she slides. Leanie makes it a wild ride. Smile, running jokes mile after mile. I try to speak, but in she slides. Leanie makes it a wild ride. Oh, shut up, Leanie, can't you see? You talk so much, it's drowning me. With your white hair and sassy flair, just give me a breath, let me share. Oh, Leanie, don't get me wrong, can't imagine life without your song. But girl, you've gotta let me in. This ain't just your show to win. So here I stand with my mic in hand, trying to keep this show as planned. Leanie laughs, guess it's gonna stay a little secret every day. Trying to keep this show as planned. Leanie laughs, guess it's gonna stay a little secret every day. Oh, shut up, Leanie, can't you see? You talk so much, it's drowning me. With your white hair and sassy flair, just give me a breath, let me share. Let me share. Oh, Leanie, don't get me wrong, can't imagine life without your song. But girl, you've gotta let me. This ain't just your show to win. Oh, shut up, Leanie, can't you see? You talk so much, it's drowning me. With your white hair and sassy flair, just give me a breath, let me share. Oh, Leanie, don't get me wrong, can't imagine your life without your song. But girl, you've gotta let me. This ain't just your show to win. So here I stand with my mic in hand, trying to keep this show as planned. Leanie laughs, guess it's gonna stay a little secret every day. So here I stand with my mic in hand, trying to keep this show as planned. Leanie laughs, guess it's gonna stay a little secret every day. In the studio we laugh all day, she's got that sass in every way. Talking fast, not a pause in sight. Leanie's got my head in a spin tonight. Oh, shut up, Leanie, can't you see? You talk so much, it's drowning me. With your white hair and sassy flair, just give me a breath, let me share. Podcast queen with a wicked smile, running jokes mile after mile. Try to speak, but in she slides. Leanie makes it a wild ride. Smile, running jokes mile after mile. I try to speak, but in she slides. Leanie makes it a wild ride. Oh, shut up, Leanie, can't you see? You talk so much, it's drowning me. With your white hair and sassy flair, just give me a breath, let me share. Oh, Leanie, don't get me wrong, can't imagine life without your song. But girl, you've gotta let me in. This ain't just your show to win. So here I stand with my mic in hand, trying to keep this show as planned. Leanie laughs, guess it's gonna stay a little secret every day. Trying to keep this show as planned. Leanie laughs, guess it's gonna stay a little secret every day. Oh, shut up, Leanie, can't you see? You talk Just give me a breath, let me share. Let me share. Oh, Lainey, don't get me wrong. Can't imagine life without your song. But girl, you've gotta let me. This ain't just your show to win. Oh, shut up, Lainey, can't you see? You talk so much, it's drowning me. With your white hair and sassy flair. Just give me a breath, let me share. Oh, Lainey, don't get me wrong. Can't imagine your life without your song. Girl, you've gotta let me. This ain't just your show to win. So here I stand with my mic in hand, trying to keep this show as planned. Lainey laughs, guess it's gonna stay our little secret every day. So here I stand with my mic in hand, trying to keep this show as planned. Lainey laughs, guess it's gonna stay our little secret every day.
Oh, I really, really appreciate it. Thank you so much for watching. Please click to subscribe. In this episode, I've got a ton of new developments in the Nancy Guthrie case. There is a Pima County, Arizona official who is accusing the sheriff, Sheriff Nanos, of scolding her for providing information to the FBI about the case. Listen to me when I say that again. Pima County official, it's actually the county assessor, and I'm going to get into all the details in a second, but the county assessor says the sheriff got mad at her for giving the FBI information related to the Nancy Guthrie case. How does that make sense? I've got the whole thing, everything that she says happened. I'm going to explain it all to you in a minute. Also, there's been an effort to remove the sheriff. I've talked about this before. There was a big meeting with the Board of Supervisors. They actually ended up voting not to remove him, but something did happen. They decided to refer everything that they've found out about the sheriff to the Attorney General for investigation. What does that actually mean? Will there be a state level investigation into the sheriff now? What does this have to even do with the Nancy Guthrie case? How could it impact the investigation? I'm going to talk to one of the county supervisors. That's coming up a little later in this episode. But first, let me get into this situation with the sheriff and the county assessor, because this really caught me off guard. I mean, I knew that there was drama and issues between the Board of Supervisors and the sheriff, but I didn't know that this issue existed between the county assessor and the sheriff. And all of this is coming from a report from the Arizona Republic and journalist Stephanie Murray. And she reports, and this goes back now to February, she reports that in February, the sheriff and the county assessor, a woman named Suzanne Druby, they had a telephone conversation, and the sheriff was upset that the assessor had provided information to the FBI. And this is what she said. She said, the tone of the call was unusual. And she said, we're sensitive to the fact that the sheriff is under a lot of stress with all of this, referring to the Nancy Guthrie situation, it means. So she said, we're sensitive to the fact that the sheriff is under a lot of stress with all of this. But yes, there was a little bit of a negative interaction. It was inferred that we were creating a lot of additional work for the sheriff's department due to us providing this information to the FBI and then them having the responsibility to follow up on all of those leads that were provided. Sorry, I have something stuck in my throat. So the assessor said, I felt like there was an insinuation that I had done something wrong by cooperating with the FBI. At that particular moment, I felt like I was put in a position where I felt like I almost should apologize, where I know definitely that that was not something that I should be doing. Very bizarre. So what exactly did the assessor do to make the sheriff upset? Well, according to the Arizona Republic, Suzanne Druby says her office fulfilled a request for information from the FBI, a request for information to aid in the Guthrie investigation. And Druby called the sheriff to tell him about it. It makes sense. She's the county assessor. He's the sheriff. They obviously know each other somewhat. So she calls him to tell him about it. And she says he was definitely frustrated. Those were the words she used. Definitely frustrated. Now, Druby is not revealing exactly what kind of information the FBI was looking for, which good on her. I mean, makes sense. She wouldn't want to give those kinds of specifics. But as county assessor, her office would be in charge of keeping track of property and tax assessments, sort of those kinds of things. So perhaps the FBI was trying to find records related to property or tax assessments. But Druby also said, and this is another quote, it seemed that he was very stressed, very frustrated. I wouldn't categorize it as yelling per se, as much as kind of scolding and expressing frustration with all of the leads he was receiving, their obligation to follow up on them, and that my office was actually doing more harm than good by providing more leads that they just had to follow up with. Now, Druby says her office's IT team actually came up with a report and submitted it to the FBI. And exactly what was in that report and why the FBI was looking for that information, we don't know. Again, perhaps a list of property owners in the area, something like that would make the most sense to me. But we don't know. At the end of the day, we don't know, and she didn't say. Hey guys, you know I'm always on the go. I don't usually have much time for cooking, and that is why I absolutely love Factor. And Factor is the sponsor of today's video. Factor. And if you see a website with your personal info, you put it into it. Privacy agents will take care of the rest. So to check it all out, go to incogni.com/Brian Entin and use code Brian Entin for 60% off. Incogni helps wipe yourself from the internet. They can't harm you if they can't find you. Click the link below to claim your 60% off and get your personal data off the market. But she did say to the Arizona Republic, in his mind, and I think here she's talking about the sheriff, in his mind, it was a lot of additional work that was being created because we handed this information over. Druby says she, quote, did not appreciate the phone call. And she said, I thought I was being extremely helpful. So to have that type of a confrontational discussion for doing something that I felt was right was very disappointing. And she told the Arizona Republic that the call ended with another member of the sheriff's department stepping in, who then told Sheriff Nanos to back off and leave the county assessor alone. Druby said the other official said Nanos should not give her a hard time for complying with an FBI request. And then she says the sheriff agreed, thanked her, and told her to have a nice day. So, I mean, talk about like a strange phone call in the middle of one of the most high-profile investigations in the country. Druby says that before that, she'd never had any bad interactions with the sheriff. She said, quote, up to that point, I had never had any negative interaction with the sheriff at all. I'm kind of chalking it up to a lot of frustration with and immense pressure that he has been under, being thrust into the national spotlight due to this investigation. However, that being said, it was a very uncomfortable, unpleasant conversation. And it's also kind of weird to think about what she said about another official from the sheriff's office getting on the phone and sort of like interrupting the sheriff. It's all very, very strange. Here's one elected county leader, the assessor, and then the sheriff. And just to remind you, I've reported that the sheriff and the FBI have a dysfunctional relationship, which maybe could explain why the sheriff was frustrated that she was giving information to the FBI. Although, I mean, come on, this woman is still missing. Why would you even get frustrated? But they do have this dysfunctional relationship, or at least did. FBI Director Kash Patel said last week that the FBI was kept out of the investigation for the first 4 days. Remember, he said that he wanted to send DNA from the Nancy Guthrie investigation to Quantico, but the sheriff instead decided to send the DNA to their private lab in Florida. So there's been some drama and some back and forth, just sort of for some context of why the sheriff may have been upset that the assessor was talking to the FBI. I tried reaching out to the assessor, but I didn't get a response. And my sense, based on sources that I have, is that this story that she told the Arizona Republic has been circulating around for a while. There are people in town who knew about it, but it just came into the headlines with Assessor Drewby talking to the Arizona Republic. Now, the sheriff has not commented on the situation. He did release a statement on the 100-day mark since Nancy Guthrie went missing. And the sheriff's office said, as we reach the 100-day mark in this investigation, scientific evidence processing and digital media analysis remain ongoing. PCSD and FBI personnel continue to review evidence using established forensic protocols. Investigative teams are also actively pursuing leads and tips, and the Pima County Sheriff's Department and the FBI encourage anyone with relevant information to come forward through established reporting methods. We remain committed to conducting a thorough and comprehensive investigation and appreciate the public's continued patience and cooperation. So that was the official sorry, I don't know, I have something in my throat today. That was the official statement from the Pima County Sheriff's Office on the 100-day mark. I said this before, but according to my sources, there are no suspects or solid leads right now behind the scenes. Of course, that could literally change at any moment. They could get more information from the DNA that could come back, or there could be a hot tip that comes in. And I've seen it before. I mean, investigations can take a turn and change literally at any moment. As for the latest on the sheriff and the effort to remove him from office, there was this Board of Supervisors meeting I was telling you guys about Tuesday night. They voted actually not to take action to unseat Sheriff Nanos. Supervisor Steve Christie made a motion to vacate Nanos from his position, but without anyone seconding the motion, it failed. And all of this goes back to allegations that Sheriff Nanos lied under oath about his work history, that he didn't disclose that he was suspended several times at his previous job. And they've been kind of digging into records from when he worked at the El Paso Police Department before he was sheriff. Despite not voting to remove him, the supervisors did express concern about his leadership and his work history at the meeting. And here's where things get interesting. The Board of Supervisors, while they decided not to remove him, they did decide to forward perjury allegations to the Attorney General's office for review. And this perjury allegation, again, goes back to allegations that Sheriff Nanos lied under oath, which is where it would be perjury because it was under oath, about his work history. So a lot happening with the sheriff, and unfortunately, you have to imagine this has some kind of impact on the Nancy Guthrie investigation, because when there's this much dysfunction, you can't imagine that wouldn't have some sort of impact, which is unfortunate. The question, where do things stand now? How could this be impacting the investigation? I want to discuss all those things with Pima County Supervisor Dr. Matt Hines. Thank you for joining me, Dr. Hines. I appreciate it. The first thing I wanted to ask you about was this situation with the assessor. You know, the fact that she has said that that the sheriff was upset with her for, providing information to the FBI. You know, she's obviously not saying what that information is. She doesn't want to get in trouble with the investigation or anything, but that the sheriff was apparently very, very upset with her for giving whatever information this was to the FBI, which seems kind of shocking.
Brian, these days I'm not terribly surprised when I hear reports of what the sheriff has done or said. I mean, now that we found out he was never qualified to be serving in law enforcement and lied on his application 42 years ago, it's pretty fair game. But yeah, this is a really, really tragic situation, and this high profile investigation. I'm anything that is being provided by any of us, and I haven't been asked by the FBI or any other law enforcement to provide anything, but if I were to be asked, of course, I would do anything and everything possible to assist in any investigation. And I'm sure the assessor did the exact same thing. And to have the response from the sheriff be what it was described as, again, very concerning. And look, whatever is necessary to help resolve that situation, especially that would have been, months ago now, that's what any of us should be doing, not complaining about having to do more work now or follow more leads or whatever he was saying.
Do you know the assessor?
Yeah, I do.
I mean, is she, just because I'm obviously not from Tucson, I don't know all the players here. I mean, I've gotten to know you a little bit and know about the sheriff and stuff, but is there any reason we shouldn't believe her account of what happened?
Oh, not at all. Not at all. That she's not gonna make this kind of thing up. Absolutely not. I was surprised to learn about it a few days ago now, whenever that was. But I'm, in terms of like the veracity, no doubt whatsoever. On the other hand, what the sheriff says, that's a little different, as we've discussed.
What is the latest with, you guys, explain to me exactly what you guys did as the Board of Supervisors. You've now referred some of this to the Attorney General?
Yeah, and I know people are going to keep saying this board keeps doing that with the sheriff, and that we are fairly limited in what we can do. We aren't the Congress. We can't just say, all right, you're kind of becoming a George Santos, so you're off the island. We can't exactly do that. There are narrow ways that we can try to do things like that. ARS 11253, having officers come before us, make report, etc. But we had a discussion behind closed doors in a private executive session with our attorneys and looked at not initially do those under oath, which I found very surprising. But 10 days later, he and his lawyer did submit a notarized affidavit making the 22-page response sworn. And so that basically, yes, maybe technically we could cite the fact that on a timeliness, from a timeliness standpoint, he did not meet the statute. I don't think that he did. Would a court sustain that? Would a judge say that was sufficient to, reverse an election and take someone out of an elective office? That's the part that we really couldn't get to that threshold. So on the advice of our attorneys, we did not pursue, vacating the office. But what we did pursue on the advice of the same counsel is that some of those responses, and we didn't say, look here, here, and here, because the Attorney General is a smart woman and has an incredibly talented team of people. So we're not going to do their job. We're not a court and we're not the AG. But we and our attorneys, in discussing his responses, had concerns about multiple areas of potential perjury. And you heard my colleague say that we would like the Attorney General to look into the situation for potential perjury. And of course, the follow-up of that would be, they would be the indicting authority. They could file charges. It would be a Class 4 felony. This is not from the 1980s now. This would be from a response to the Board of Supervisors a few weeks ago. And that's a big problem, because we already saw that he's willing to I would say, lie under oath, what appears to be lying under oath back in December of during that federal deposition with regard to the Sergeant Cross case. That is not the purview of the AG, because that goes over into the kind of realm of the federal courts, I'm told, by the AG's office. But this would definitely be something the AG should, and I believe will look into, and potentially file charges if she sees fit.
I was just looking at a document from when the sheriff worked in El Paso, and I don't know if you've seen this, where it basically says, let me find it again here.
Is this from his personnel file?
Yes. Yeah, where it says the 5-member board unanimously voted that Officer Chris Fernandez be terminated from the El Paso Police Department.
Yes.
Is that new? I mean, I don't remember. I heard about the suspensions, but did we know that he was actually fired?
So because of that, his very long disciplinary record, that 2.5 page list there, the last 2 entries were, I believe, I think like the disposition order was like resigned in lieu of termination, kind of typed over to the right side. But in terms of that kind of documentation, no, that we didn't have the full picture. And I kind of think that maybe the sheriff didn't think we were going to get it. But thankfully, I mean, the Arizona Republic, Stephanie Murray, investigative reporting, she's been getting a lot of records out of El Paso. They seem to keep things since they were a republic, like that. We have that file now. And the thing is, that was published on April 21st in a very large kind of like line by line expose of every single suspension thing, whatever happened with Nanos based on that 88-page personnel file. So, but what you're describing is the very striking, it's kind of black and white. It's in writing. We know what happened in 1982. You just described it. A disciplinary board found that for 9 or 10 different specific reasons, he was failing to meet, and they even cite the Texas statute, I believe, or code or statute that is speaking to like their version of peace officer or law enforcement officer certification there. And they say in their description, he's consistently been unable to meet even the basic, the lowest level of standards that we require in the state of Texas, and he must leave. And therefore, the board voted, as you said, unanimously to terminate. Because they were quite magnanimous, or just for whatever grace, he was, in fact, moments before that decision became public, allowed to resign in lieu of termination, which unfortunately for all of us preserved his ability to come over to Arizona and get a job here under false pretenses. But he signed it. Like on that, I believe on the same form you might be referring to, a couple of lines below, I think it said like disposition resigned in lieu of termination, or resignation in lieu of termination, Christopher J. Nanos, signature and date. So he knew the circumstances of the separation from El Paso. But now let's fast forward April 21st, 2026. Here's what he tells the Board of Supervisors. Okay, my supervisor and I had a disagreement about some vehicular towing thing, and I was going to have to face a 3-day suspension. I appealed the 3-day suspension to the chief. I believe the chief sided with my supervisor, and instead of accepting that 3-day suspension, I went ahead and left. Okay, buddy, you've been suspended 8 other times. 8 for 37 days, including 10 days for one, 15 days for another. That's the one where he nearly killed a guy, put him into a coma in the ICU in El Paso, got the police department sued, and was all over the news there, right? That was the handcuffed robbery suspect he beat in the back of a squad car. So, all right, so he's facing a 3-day suspension for whatever vehicular towing thing was. And that's going to make him resign. That doesn't even hold water, because it doesn't make any sense based on the rest of his history. So what he told the Board of Supervisors under oath was, in my view, appears to be perjury.
So I know none of this has to do with Hey guys, thanks so much for checking out my show. I really, really appreciate it. Thank you so much for watching.
He and his lawyer did submit a notarized affidavit making the 22-page response sworn. And so that basically, yes, maybe technically we could cite the fact that on a timeliness, from a timeliness standpoint, he did not meet the statute. I don't think that he did. would a court sustain that? Would a judge say that was sufficient to, reverse an election and take someone out of an elective office? That's the part that we really couldn't get to that threshold. So on the advice of our attorneys, we did not pursue, vacating the office. But what we did pursue on the advice of the same counsel is that some of those responses, and we didn't say, look here, here, and here, because the attorney general is a smart woman and has an incredibly talented team of people. So we're not going to do their job. We're not a court and we're not the AG. But we and our attorneys, in discussing his responses, had concerns about multiple areas of potential perjury. And that's, you heard my colleague say that we would like the attorney general to look into the situation for potential perjury. And of course, the follow-up of that would be, they would be the indicting authority. They could file charges. It would be a class 4 felony. This is not from the 1980s now. This would be from a response to the Board of Supervisors a few weeks ago. And that's a big problem, because we already saw that he's willing to I would say, lie under oath, what appears to be lying under oath back in December of during that federal deposition with regard to the Sergeant Cross case. That is not the purview of the AG, because that goes over into the kind of realm of the federal courts, I'm told, by the AG's office. But this would definitely be something the AG should, and I believe will look into, and potentially file charges if she sees fit.
I was just looking at a document from when the sheriff worked in El Paso, and I don't know if you've seen this, where it basically says, let me find it again here.
Is this from his personnel file?
Yes. Yeah, where it says the 5-member board unanimously voted that Officer Chris Fernandez be terminated from the El Paso Police Department.
Yes.
Is that new? I mean, I don't remember. I heard about the suspensions, but did we know that he was actually fired?
So because of that, his very long disciplinary record, that 2.5 page list there, the last 2 entries were, I believe, I think, like the disposition order was like resigned in lieu of termination, kind of typed over to the right side. But in terms of that kind of documentation, no, that we didn't have the full picture. And I kind of think that maybe the sheriff didn't think we were going to get it. But thankfully, I mean, the Arizona Republic, Stephanie Murray, investigative reporting, she's been getting a lot of records out of El Paso. They seem to keep things since they were a republic, like that. We have that file now. And the thing is, that was published on April 21st in a very large kind of like line by line expose of every single suspension thing, whatever happened with Nanos, based on that 88-page personnel file. So, but what you're describing is the very striking, it's kind of black and white. It's in writing. We know what happened in 1982. You just described it. A disciplinary board found that for 9 or 10 different specific reasons, he was failing to meet, and they even cite the Texas statute, I believe, or code or statute that is speaking to like their version of peace officer or law enforcement officer certification there. And they say in their description, he's consistently been unable to meet even the basic, the lowest level of standards that we require in the state of Texas, and he must leave. And therefore, the board voted, as you said, unanimously to terminate. Because were quite magnanimous, or just for whatever grace, he was, in fact, moments before that decision became public, allowed to resign in lieu of termination, which unfortunately for all of us preserved his ability to come over to Arizona and get a job here under false pretenses. But he signed it. Like on that, I believe on the same form you might be referring to, a couple of lines below, I think it said like disposition resigned in lieu of termination, or resignation in lieu of termination, Christopher J. Nanos, signature and date. So he knew the circumstances of the separation from El Paso. But now let's fast forward April 21st, 2026. Here's what he tells the Board of Supervisors. Okay, my supervisor and I had a disagreement about some vehicular towing thing, and I was going to have to face a 3-day suspension. I appealed the 3-day suspension to the chief. I believe the chief sided with my supervisor, and instead of accepting that 3-day suspension, I went ahead and left. Okay, buddy, you've been suspended 8 other times. 8 for 37 days, including 10 days for one, 15 days for another. That's the one where he nearly killed a guy, put him into a coma in the ICU in El Paso, got the police department sued, and was all over the news there, right? That was the handcuffed robbery suspect he beat in the back of a squad car. So, all right, so he's facing a 3-day suspension for whatever vehicular towing thing was. And that's going to make him resign. That doesn't even hold water because it doesn't make any sense based on the rest of his history. So what he told the Board of Supervisors under oath was, in my view, appears to be perjury.
So I know none of this has to do with Nancy Guthrie particularly, but
No.
do you think any of this would have come out if it wasn't for the Nancy Guthrie investigation and sort of the spotlight on Nanos?
I highly doubt it. I think that especially after his February 3rd, like colossal, I mean, that was the quote that still I have emblazoned in my head. Like the fact that he said, I'm just not used to all you guys hanging on my every word and holding me accountable for the things that I say. That's the sheriff in a very, very troubling, high profile case saying, very true words, as it turned out, but really not very reassuring to the public or to the family or to anybody. But after that, especially, and February and onward, I think just the high profile, that high profile investigation, I think that's what really led some media outlets, some journalists to do a little more digging, and that's really kind of what sort of kicked things off when that 3-page disciplinary record came out from a more limited public records request that I believe it was Stephanie Murray from the Republic did, Arizona Republic. That started. Then we were all like, wait, how did this guy get a job? We didn't know about the specifics of the citations and the unanimous vote of the disciplinary board, which we now do, but that even reinforces that. How did he get a job? How did he get peace officer certification in Arizona? Because you can either get it through a new independent background check, or it's waived and you just kind of get peace officer certification if you're already like a police officer in good standing in Michigan or Florida or Texas. So he probably transferred that peace officer certification in, had the background check waived because he already had it in Texas, did not disclose the fact that he was fired because he couldn't adhere to those standards. So, that's all that stuff has come out. Again, the board has taken no action with regard to any specific investigation. Well, I guess we did with the botched rape investigation in 23, but not certainly the Guthrie investigation or any other since. What we've taken exception, our issue is just simply his lack of qualifications for being in the job and all of the lies. And the strange thing for me, Brian, is that we all know, right? We like the 88-page personnel file was appended to the Arizona Republic article. That was there. Yet 10 days later, his lawyer advised him to swear to something that appears to be in no way consistent what those 88 pages tell us happened in El Paso in his response to the board. That is bizarre to me. And I don't know, maybe we'll see what happens, but we wouldn't be having this discussion most likely if the high profile case didn't really cast a light and really provoke additional scrutiny on the head of our largest law enforcement agency.
Yeah, Sergeant Aaron Cross, who is obviously with Pima County, but also the head of the union. He told me, which kind of surprised me. He said that he thinks that the sheriff should have handed over the Nancy Guthrie case to the FBI because they had hundreds of agents ready. And I guess I was surprised to hear him say that. Most people within the department, even the ones that don't like the sheriff, have told me, no, we can still handle it ourselves. What do you think about that? Do you think that was a mistake? Should the sheriff have just handed it over?
So, and I said this on, I think I actually said this on News Nation somewhere in the second or third week of the investigation. And again, not as necessarily any sort of being critical, but just from sheer resources and capacity. We are a large county. We have 1,500 folks in the department, dozens of detectives, but we also have a large population of 1.1 million people. And we have other cases and other crimes and other things going on here, right? So to sustain the level that was sustained for weeks and weeks and weeks in terms of just the resource allocation, diversion from other cases, and all that kind of stuff that was going on. The lab testing, I think due to that, there's a very, I believe there is some concerning relationship between the sheriff and the FBI because of the way they investigated him for misusing racketeering dollars back in 2016. He was not charged, to be really clear. So I'm not quite sure why he wasn't charged, because others were. But like that, that relationship, not great. And we've seen him send samples to labs in Florida, which we have to pay for, county tax dollars, when every single sample you send to the FBI is covered. And so as one of the 5 budget authorities of Pima County, right, I think about dollars. I want the outcome, of course, that we all want, which is a resolution here. But I also have to be a steward of the dollar here, because that's my job, what the taxpayers put me here for. And when you have a smaller jurisdiction, and most of us are relative to the FBI, smaller jurisdictions, maybe not LA County or Cook County, maybe New York, some really massive cities or their jurisdictions might keep these kinds of cases, but FBI does missing persons. This is a pretty complicated case with a lot of nuances and a lot of strange stuff going on. And I was hoping and expecting that the sheriff would pass the investigative lead role to the FBI within a week or two, for a variety of reasons, including just like relieving some of the burden that is facing the taxpayers of Pima County now, when a lot of that I think should have been shifted to the FBI.
Do you have any idea what it's going to cost? Has any sort of estimate come in yet?
The only estimation, I asked about this in one of our somewhat recent meetings. It was like 2 or 3 meetings ago. The estimate at that time was approximately $1 million over the existing budget we had already allocated. I know that doesn't sound like a lot, especially because our budget's
so
like
$1 million just on the
that's just on one case, right?
And so who told you that? Was that from the sheriff's office?
I believe the inference. So I asked in one of our public meetings, I believe that. So I asked the county administrator to get us an estimate, and that was her approximate, her estimate at that time. That was a good month and a half ago now. The reason we're getting into budget season, so I'm just curious what we have to kind of anticipate. And if we have like a fund balance at the end here, can we spend more money on affordable housing or more books for the library or filling some potholes? Or is that all gone because it's kind of getting sucked into the sheriff's budget that we didn't know, that we didn't anticipate due to some of that? I just think, we shouldn't be bearing the brunt of all of this. And we should be utilizing the FBI to the fullest extent, not only for their expertise. They have more people that have more experience doing these kinds of cases. And also on the fiduciary side of things, it's the most responsible thing to do for the county.
I really appreciate Dr. Hines for taking the time to talk with me. Obviously, there's a big can of worms that was opened in Pima County that I don't think would have seen the light of day if it wasn't for the Nancy Guthrie investigation. Unfortunately, here we are. It's now been more than 3 months. Nancy is still missing, literally just vanished from her home in Tucson, Arizona. And you just hope that someone has some kind of information. The DNA latest that I've heard is that they're still testing it. That one strand of hair is really the main piece of DNA that they're looking at. Remember, it's rootless. It's easier to get DNA off a hair with a root. They've been doing that for years, but rootless DNA is very, very difficult sometimes to obtain DNA off of. So that's taking time. They're going to try for IgG, investigative genetic genealogy. If you look back at my old episodes, I've talked a lot about that. And that's how they caught Brian Koberger. They look back into people's family histories. All that's ongoing. Or you just hope that there will be some kind of hot tip. So I'll stay on the story. I'm trying to follow all the little ins and outs that happen, including like the stuff with the sheriff and the assessor and the meeting that happened. So I appreciate you guys for following along too. I'll keep you guys posted if there are any developments. Appreciate you guys for following the channel and subscribing. And someone actually said, I read a lot of the comments. Sometimes like when I'm in bed, I'll just scroll through comments, and someone was like, oh, it's so nice that he appreciates us for, like, says, I appreciate you for subscribing. And I actually really do. I don't just like say that every time. I really mean it. It means a lot to me that you guys subscribe to the channel. I do all this myself. And I appreciate you guys. So that's about it for tonight. I'll talk to you guys later.
Running down the street, away from the house.
Tonight, the last known of Nancy Guthrie. Does it reveal the killer's ID? This as the Nancy Guthrie killer's route revealed. Good evening. I'm Nancy Grace. This is Crime Stories. I want to thank you for being with us.
She is 84 years old. Her health, her heart is fragile.
And every hour and minute and second and every long night has been agony since then.
She is without any medicine. She needs it to survive.
We need your help.
What a difference a DoorDash, an Uber, a delivery, a Lyft can make. Do you remember in Brian Kohberger's prosecution after the murders of 4 beautiful University of Idaho students?
Good things get better. 1, 2, 3, make it look easy. Put your ass left so breezy. Whoa! In and out, my world looks like it's made.
fresh finds perfectly picked for you. Now in new at
And now I have to testify. Big murder case too, so yeah, because I'm a DoorDash driver, so yeah.
You have to testify in which murder case?
Murder case with the college girl.
Oh.
My DoorDash driver, I self-ran that. Very nice.
Yeah, take that, Koberger. Busted by the DoorDash delivery woman. To Joseph Scott Morgan joining us, professor of forensics, Jacksonville State University, the author of Blood Beneath My Feet on Amazon, star of a hit podcast, Body Bags with Joe Scott Morgan. But for our purposes, he is a death investigator with over 10,000 investigations under his belt. Joe Scott Morgan, do you remember in Koberger, eyewitness DoorDash delivery person identifies Koberger as being outside the murder scene, 1122 King Road, at the time of the murders, 4 o'clock in the morning. Really?
Yeah.
Busted.
And
Now, in
hey,
this
you know
case,
what? I don't. Yeah,
go ahead.
No, I was going to say I'm reflecting back right now. You could have knocked me over with a feather when we got that footage. Do you remember that? Because we didn't know that existed. And all of a sudden, all it takes, Nancy, is just one little turn of the screw, right? Something that we're not completely aware of. And then all of a sudden, boom, the narrative completely changes, or at least the narrative is more clear. And I think we might be headed down this road with Mrs. Guthrie, Nancy.
We have just learned that in the Celeste Rivas case, where D4VD, aka David Anthony Burke, is now charged in her murder and her dismemberment of this then 13-year-old little girl. Don't show me him. I've seen him enough. I don't care if I ever see him again. The Tesla. Every Tesla has 360-degree visual, unless it's been destroyed. In this case, see how valuable that is in the Celeste Rivas case? In this case, no one until a few days ago has been looking at around that Uber delivery, that Uber drive. So what, if anything, can we learn, Joe Scott Morgan?
Well, certainly directionality. What route was taken. And also, look, as an old investigator, I want to know as much as I possibly can about the driver, that they have an awareness of her, maybe who she is, this sort of thing. Were they followed in any way, I think? And so any kind of players that might be involved in this peripheral, look, we'll take anything, right? We'll take absolutely anything relative to the data that can be sourced. Where did this individual go before? Okay, he picked up Mrs. Guthrie. Where did he go after he picked up Mrs. Guthrie? I want to know everything about it in granular detail, Nancy.
From what we can tell, there was intense planning of the kidnap of Mrs. Guthrie. So what we're getting at is when he picked up Mrs. Guthrie to take her to Annie's, we have reason to believe the perp was already in the neighborhood, positioned, waiting. Straight out to Cheryl McCollum joining us, Cold Case Investigative Research Institute founder. She is also a crime scene investigator, and she is the star of a hit podcast, Zone 7. She's the author of a brand new book, Swans Don't Swim in a Sewer, Solving the Cold Case of the Flint River Killer's Daughter. Amazing book, by the way. Cheryl McCollum, thank you for being with us. We have reason to believe that if when you don't know a horse, Cheryl McCollum, you look at his track record. We already know that Miss Guthrie's kidnapper was there on January 11. He's caught on video and very likely there on previous occasions. He was in that neighborhood and poised with his accomplice when Mrs. Guthrie was first picked up and taken to Annie Guthrie's. Many people believe he may have already gotten into her place before Mrs. Guthrie returned home that night.
Nancy, I want to go back to the car first. when I first get to a scene and I get out of my car, I take photographs up and down the street. The reason is I don't know what cars belong there and what don't. I don't know who parks on the street normally, who's in a driveway, etc. They can go back with that Tesla video and see if there's somebody parked on the side of the road, if there's somebody parked in a driveway that doesn't belong. This person we know cased out her home before. You already mentioned the 11th. We think, again on the 20-something, and then on the 30th. This person cased it. They knew her, comings and goings. They knew what she looked like. On this night, they, I believe, were laying in wait. I think they know exactly when she got home, and that's why you see him going back to the front door after all the lights are out, and he thinks she's sound asleep.
Cheryl. Guys, joining me in addition to Joe Scott Morgan, Cheryl McCollum is with us, the star of Zone 7 podcast. Cheryl, how many cases did you and I work together in inner city Atlanta and Fulton County? I mean, can we even count them? I can't.
Thousands.
Yeah, it's hard when I look back to count the numbers. 100, 150 brand new felonies a week times 4, that's a month, times 12, times 10 years plus. That's a lot of cases. So Cheryl, is there anything new under the sun? Defendants do the same thing over and over and over. They can't help themselves. Like, think about it. Everybody listening right now, do you brush your teeth the same way, at the same time, every morning, in the same order? Do you wash your clothes a certain way? Do you get somewhere in your car and go, oh my goodness, I don't even remember getting here. I must have zoned out. People do the same things over and over and over. It's like, it's muscle memory. So what I'm saying, Cheryl, we know this guy, the perp, one of them anyway, because I believe there had to be at least 2 involved. We know this guy lay in wait before. We know he cased the scene more than once. So he was very high on preparation, getting there ahead of time. What would be any different this time? It's like every time a dog sits down, it circles 3 times. He was in that neighborhood, which makes it very important to review the video from the Uber driver that picked up Mrs. Guthrie that night. And also, Cheryl McCollum, a lot has been made about the daughter, Annie Guthrie, and brother-in-law of Savannah Guthrie, their car being impounded, and why it took so long. How do I know it didn't have 360 nav, just like a Tesla? Remember what we learned in the Alex Murdaugh double murder trial and the murders of his wife, Maggie, and son, Paul? His SUV, it was a big honking like a Wagoneer or something, revealed so much data. When he took off from the crime scene that night, scratching off, when he slowed down his vehicle, let the passenger window down electronically. Yes, the black box of his car showed that. Threw out Maggie's cell phone and then scratched off to hide out at his mother's house. Remember all that? So much we can learn. So Cheryl, so while their vehicle was in impound, how do I know they weren't looking at that?
They should have been. They not only should be looking at any type of data that could come from the car, whether it's video or from the black box. Did that car move after 9 o'clock? They would know that. And that's why it's critical when you're ruling people in and ruling them out. Go through all of it in order to truly rule somebody out. The data from that phone, the data from the car, it's going to tell the story. That's not something they can manipulate. The Uber driver the same way. If he were to put his phone on airplane mode, that black box in that car is still operational and still telling us whether it's rolling forward, in park, the trunk opens, the passenger door opens. We will know all of it.
Back to you, Joe Scott Morgan, you and I believe Cheryl and Fitz were talking at the very, very beginning when Miss Guthrie went missing about the importance, the critical nature of vehicles in this case. And now it's coming true.
We absolutely were, because she's dependent, I think, to a great degree upon people moving her about. And so our vehicles are so tied to what our identity is and how we move about, and also where we are at any given time. So I think that this could be one of the keys that's going to unlock this. We can talk about physical evidence all you want to, but the big piece to this is her movement, because that's essential, Nancy. And one of the big questions we've always had: how did she get into the house, out of the house? Was she conveyed in any way? What's being implied here? So all of the actors that at least the police have revealed to this point are going to play a role in this, trying to create this timeline. And hopefully, Nancy, and it's rather grim, but where is she? I think is a big part to this as well. And that's a question that we all want to know, right? We want to know who the perp is, but we want to know where she is in her current status, Nancy.
Well, again, a track record. How many cases have been busted by vehicles? And all we need is one clue about the vehicle. I mean, think it through. Let's take a look, just for the fun of it, at Brian Kohberger's white Elantra zipping around the neighborhood, caught on one cam after the next, after the next. Yep. And it wasn't just Brian Kohberger. Do I have to say Molly Tibbetts? As you will recall, Cheryl McCollum, star of Zone 7, Cheryl McCollum, in the Molly Tibbetts case, the perp was unknown to her. There was no connection, which made the case even more difficult to crack. It was like a needle in a haystack until video emerged of the killer's car going back and forth and back and forth. And then you see Molly Tibbetts come into the frame. And the person, the perp, is talking to her, trying to get her in the car. She threatens to call 911. What was interesting about that vehicle? It had distinct markings along the side of it. And that is how the killer was caught. And we've seen it play out over and over again. In the case of the glam yoga teacher, Caitlin Armstrong, her SUV, let's take a look at that, was spotted going round and around and around the murder scene just before a world-class female dirt bike racer was murdered. Over what? A man. Because her boyfriend, Caitlin Armstrong's boyfriend, had a hamburger with the victim. So what's her logical action? Kill her. That video cracked the case. So in this case, straight out to Brian Fitzgibbons joining us, Director of Operations, USPA Nationwide Security, leading a team of investigators around the world, finding and extracting missing people. He's also a former Marine and Iraqi war vet. Brian, this vehicle, I understand that new eyes are now looking at video for parked cars, for people walking, not just on the night of the abduction, but before that, because we know the kidnapper was there ahead of time. That is his MO, modus operandi, method of operation. So what could the Uber driver's car reveal, depending on what kind of car it is?
I think you and Joe Scott Morgan hit the nail on the head just earlier there, that what's in the background and the periphery of that video. So on top of establishing that Mrs. Guthrie was coherent, in a good state while she was in that ride, there might be other things that we can see. Was there a vehicle spotted on a front-facing camera? Some of these Ubers have not only rear-facing passenger cameras, but they could have front-facing cameras as well, operating at the same time. And I'll add one piece here. There are still thousands of hours of video collected from both public and private sources that review is ongoing and a very tedious effort. But what they're focusing on is trying to find a vehicle in the right space and right time that can lead to be further investigated.
Now, we know, moving beyond the Uber driver that picked up Nancy Guthrie that night, a lot has been made to you, Joe Scott Morgan, about Annie Guthrie and her husband's vehicle. We know that it was a blue Honda CRV, and Hondas, CRV specifically, do have nav system depending on the trim level you get on the car. Now, what does that mean? And what, if anything, can we learn from that? Because he, the son-in-law, brings Nancy home, and you know the killer was somewhere in the area when she was brought home.
When we're thinking about her delivery back home, who exactly is out there watching? Because Nancy, as I've held all along, and I think this is kind of obvious, but this is a targeted attack. They knew her. They knew who she was. They knew her comings and goings. And here's the thing. They knew that she's vulnerable. And so they're going to spring whenever they see that her guard is down. We're talking about kind of late at night. She's barely ambulatory. She's worn out. She's been with her family at this point in time. They know she's going to turn in for bed, Nancy. It's been a long day, right? And so they're observing, they're waiting, they're watching. Now, what are they waiting for exactly? Because, that's a bigger question, thinking about, why out of all the people in the world would they want to go after this poor woman? Well, I mean, I have my own thoughts about that relative to they know who her daughter is. I think everybody's going to know that's involved in this. And so they've targeted her, right? And so they're going to wait until they can spring their trap. And the question is, where did they put their vehicle to transport her off? And back to what Brian had said, this idea of going through all of this videography is going to be key to try to determine where another vehicle may have come and introduced themselves or itself into this equation, this visual equation that we're trying to figure out at this point in time. That's going to be critical. And look, I don't know who's looking at the video. I'm assuming it's probably the feds. I hope it's the feds, and that they're going to try to break this down as into the base elements, because nothing, and I mean nothing, Nancy, at this point in time is off the table. Everybody has to be considered. And, as my grandpa used to say, let the hide come with the hair. I don't care who it impacts relative to the evidence, relative to a vehicle. Check it out. Go out there, look for these individuals, put them up against the wall, talk to them about it. Let's find out, why were you there during that night? I'm hoping that they've done it to this point. I'm hoping that they're continuing to do it, because you have to press in any investigation. As we well know, time is a precious commodity in this case.
So tonight, in addition to a review of video footage from not only that Uber driver, but from Annie Guthrie's vehicle, to determine not just what was Mrs. Guthrie wearing, what was her demeanor, did she look ill, was she concerned? Not just that, looking for the vehicle, and that is going to require a lot of enhancement of the video. God willing, the video is still there. We also learned that fresh eyes are reviewing the evidence from the feds. Not only is that video being reviewed as we go to air, we learn that Annie Guthrie herself provided the route she believes the killer used that night. Let's take a look at it. Straight out to Dave Mack, Crime Stories investigative reporter. What is this? Where did it come from?
This actually, Annie Guthrie was in a group chat online with neighbors and sent this map to them at the beginning of the investigation, Nancy. This was put out there early, hoping that somebody might have seen something or had video along, you see the blue map line there, that somebody along that way could look through their video. I mean, this is really an incredible source of information from Annie Guthrie, coming up with what she thought was the plan, or the route rather, taken by on the way home. So they're looking for anyone along this pathway, that might have seen something It's curious when you really get into this that she's marked different addresses along the way. It's just an incredible piece of information that Annie Guthrie offered to this group with neighbors talking about the area.
You know, if this route is real, if this is the route the killer took, straight out to you, Cheryl McCollum joining us, crime scene investigator of many years, author of a brand new book and star of Zone 7. Okay, what do we do with it? This is the route that Annie Guthrie is allegedly convinced the killer used. It's full of evidence.
Nancy, when you're looking at this map and you see all the places, the nail salon, I mean, you've got tons of businesses, you've got residential areas. I would not, number one, I would not limit my investigation to this map, but I would certainly go through it based on what her daughter believes could be a route. We are over 80 days into this thing and we don't have a legitimate video of a vehicle. You've got to ask yourself why. How is that possible with all of these intersections that we know have cameras, the gas stations, the churches, the businesses? How do we not have a vehicle? Well, Nancy, as you know, I was out there, and here's what I can tell you. At any given point almost, you could take a hard right or a hard left and cut through little parts of the desert. It's vast. It's open. You don't have to go through that intersection if you don't want to. You can go right through parts of the land and avoid some of these places. So again, we know at 127, he's at the front door. We know by 229, the app has disconnected to her watch. We have a timetable. There's no way at this point, after 80 days, they can't pinpoint 1 mile away in that circumference and not catch him somehow. And I think with all the planning, he avoided those cameras.
You know, he avoided those cameras, Cheryl. I hear what you're saying, but it's also a non sequitur. It doesn't make sense. If he did all that camera avoidance, then how come he didn't know the camera on her front porch worked?
I don't think he cared because, again, he's not in a hurry. He knows he's completely covered. He knows there's no connection to her. They don't know who he is. She doesn't know who he is. Again, after 80 days, we don't know who he is. So he didn't have a jammer. Otherwise, he wouldn't be acting like he did. I don't believe he had an accomplice. If he did, why is he the only one caught on video over multiple days and multiple times? Why is he the only one we see dressed the same? And the only thing that changes on the 30th, he now has a weapon and a backpack. He came mission ready on that day. He was ready that day. The days before, casing the joint, laying out his plan.
Let's look in depth at the route Annie Guthrie identified as the killer's route. Let's start with Lulu Walker Elementary School. First out to you, Brian Fitzgibbons. Take a look at that. You know they've got to have cameras. On the map is to the far left. See that? It's on the frontage. In other words, it faces the street. They have got to have cameras all over. What do you make of it?
Yeah, and this map was provided by Annie Guthrie out to the public in an effort to generate video tips, right? To identify a route and say, hey, any private residences and individuals that may have captured video, send this in right away. Now, to your point about the elementary school, we've got public locations like a school, library, and then you have private businesses along that route, pharmacies, gas stations, things like that, that undoubtedly captured video at that time. And I think we've talked a lot about a lot of the missteps here. Getting this route information out was not one of them. This would help generate those leads and help people to save that video before it expired.
Joe Scott, there is a plethora of information. Look at the elementary school. What do you see?
Well, I can see 4 points, or at least probably multiple, more than 4 points of where cameras could be positioned. And it's going to have a field of visual perspective. Here's the thing. when you take a look at this and these cameras, if they're working, and we've run into that before, have we not? On each corner of the building, these.
For 125 years, the people of Firestone have been building products and services with one thing in mind: to make sure you get to where you need to be, so you can show up for the people who rely on you.
Let's go, baby!
These cameras, their field of view will be intersecting. Okay, so if you think about the vision that a camera has, as it goes out, it kind of expands, right? So each one of these points will intersect with the other. The cool thing about this, from, let's just say, from the perspective of the school, that these things are going to be overlapping. All right, they're going to overlap, and you can catch. If you can't catch it from one, you can catch it from the other. I'm talking about the color description of the vehicle, and in addition to that, you might be able to get a hit on a license plate relative to all of this. So these fields of view, if you will, are intersecting or overlapping of one another. And this is on, obviously, a main thoroughfare here. We're talking about a school, right? So parents are coming and going, throughout the day. They're going to have a circle, that you have to pass through, drop these kids off. And nowadays, with the way schools are, security is at the top of their list. So hopefully these cameras are all functioning. Hopefully they're sensitive enough to pick up on any critical data.
I got something for you, everybody. Green Toes North Nail Salon and Massage. Take a look to the right of the building. Right in front. Surveillance camera. Right in front, Cheryl McCollum.
That's the first thing that I saw, Nancy, when you sent the picture. Not only is it right in the front, it would capture the parking lot and the roadway. So again, my question becomes, why don't we have the car? If this is the route that he took, we would know the time that the app separated from the pacemaker, that the approximate time that he would be passing through there. Again, you're talking about 2 in the morning, 2:30, 3 a.m. There's not going to be that many vehicles. I don't understand how we don't already have it. My other question becomes, why does Annie Guthrie believe this is the route, and where does she think they were going? Those are key questions for me that I don't know the answer to yet. But again, you pass more cameras than you know every day. ATMs have cameras. Buses have cameras. I mean, you're on camera more than you think you are, but after 80-something days, we don't have this guy.
Summertime expenses stacking up fast. For many, the only option is swiping that credit card, leaving you trapped in a cycle of high interest debt. But go to American Finances, talk to them. They look at your current debt and can show you how your home equity can work for you. Imagine rolling that high interest debt into one very manageable monthly payment. No upfront fees, zero pressure from salary-based consultants. Why is that important? Because they're not on a contingency fee. They're not salespeople that are going to get a cut if they sell you their services. On average, their customers are saving $800 a month, not $800 in all, $800 a month. Start today, and you might be able to delay 2 mortgage payments. American Financing. Gabby missing. Nobody knows where Gabby is. Her parents are distraught. They're frantic. They're in a panic. They can't get any cooperation from Brian Laundrie's family, who's staying quiet. They know that Gabby Petito did not come back from a cross-country trip with her fiance, Brian Laundrie. They know she's missing. He's in her Ford Transit. Where is she? If it had not been for civilian sleuths that spot her Ford Transit in the middle of dispersed camping, you know what that is? We're campers. It means there are no lights. There are no electric hookups. There's no porta potties. There's nothing. You're out there with the antelopes, you and the crickets. If they had not spotted her Ford Transit and said, hey, that looks like Gabby Petito's Transit, and they call police, and not far from there, what was left of her remains were found. Why is it law enforcement so often discounts civilian tips like what Annie has provided?
Yeah, there's an inherent bias with a number of investigators based on their experience. They look at somebody from the public, is from a family member, and they see a lot of emotion there, and they immediately discount what's being said. Now, I'll call back right to the beginning of this investigation. Annie Guthrie was in the house telling investigators there is no chance that that Mrs. Guthrie wandered off, that she's unable to walk more than 50 yards on her own power. And they were still, in the immediate sense, treating it as an elderly person wandering off. So, hey, this comes to missed opportunities, right? No investigator, no investigative agency is going to be perfect. However, there have been some big missteps here with not listening to the family and, might I say, some of these tips from the public.
Cheryl McCollum, you are a crime scene investigator. In my cases that I prosecuted, those are the first people I listen to. It's the family and what input they have in a case. Here, for whatever reason, you're wondering why. You know what? At some point, Cheryl, why ask why? Just accept that Annie Guthrie believes this is the route the killer took and run with it. Why is it law enforcement is so resistant to civilian or family input?
I think in this case, you have to listen to her. Nothing else has panned out. And to me, you're at that scene, Nancy. If this was you and I standing inside that house, we don't even have to listen to Annie. You're looking over there. Her eyeglasses are there. Her cell phone is there. Her hearing aids are there. Her walker is there. Her shoes are there. This woman didn't leave on her own. It's clear she did not. So if you've got her child telling you, I think this is the route, you need to check it out anyway. From her home, that driveway, you can only go left or right. Once you get to a major intersection to the left and one to the right, at that point, if you do not have that killer's car on video, then pay attention to what her daughter's telling you. You got to check it out. You have to check out all routes. You have to check out all cameras. Even if we thought that the kidnapper went to the right, I'm going to go to the houses to the left because, again, Nancy, he cased the joint. He looked at all the homes. He looked at where he could park and hide and then go to her house and be unseen the entire time. No neighbor, again, has produced the vehicle. We have him. He's been caught on camera more than once at the front door, but not from a neighbor.
Take a look now at Circa 79 Salon. It has just been renovated. I'm going to show you now the before shot. Before it was renovated, it was called Chantilly Tea Room, and it was transitioned into Circa 79. To Dave Mack, Crime Stories investigative reporter. As we're taking a look at the Circa 79 Salon, formerly Chantilly Tea Room, the fact that it was renovated is important. I'm going to get to that. You heard Cheryl McCollum say, why did Annie think this is the route? You know what? Why ask why? Again, she thinks it's the route based on what she knows. So I'm running with it. And I'm not just looking for the perp. I'm looking for his vehicle, and not just the day of the kidnapping, other days like January 11. So why do we believe, if we know, why did Annie choose this route as the likely route the killer took?
Nancy, we don't know specifically why, but this was Annie Guthrie in the first days of the investigation, and she's trying to help. Her mom is missing. She's in a panic mode of helping. She's not getting any feedback, leading her to believe that she's getting the result she's after, which is, where's my mom? So she actually volunteers. Here's where, because, she lives in the area. Annie Guthrie and Tommaso don't live that far from Nancy Guthrie's home. And so she knows all of the routes. She knows the roads that people go and drive on. And that's why she put it out there. And I agree with you. More than just a Joe Blow citizen, calling this in. This is the daughter of the victim, and she's putting this out there as a possibility. Now, this is a very specific getaway route, and it's easy to follow right there on the map. So when you get down to the nitty gritty, Nancy, this was Annie trying to help.
Okay. Bottom line, there was a lot of words to say, we don't know. But thank you anyway. Let's take a look at Chantilly Tea Room. That is what Circa 79 was before it was remodeled. It's a big structure over 3,000 feet. But what's interesting to me, it was remodeled by retail specialists with Cushman Wakefield. Why do I care? Because if it was remodeled recently, Cheryl McCollum, that tells me they've got surveillance cameras.
Possibly. What concerns me with any remodel is the cameras are going to be, taken apart. They're going to be rewired. So for a period of time, they won't have any. And it's probably the last thing they're going to put back together. So again, I'm not asking why, the reason that you're thinking. I'm asking why for the investigation. If this pans out and we know the direction they're going, then we know where they're probably taking her. Now we know where better to search. Again, Nancy, I have not seen a legitimate search, meaning let's get some volunteers out there. Let's go shoulder to shoulder. Let's pan out. Let's get some horses and ATVs. We haven't seen it. We haven't seen a call for a search from Savannah Guthrie. She could have gotten 5,000 volunteers out there. It hasn't happened. So either law enforcement doesn't think this has anything to do with an escape route, or they're ignoring vital evidence. But I'll tell you, I wish we had the 911 call. I wish we had the first thing they said. I think that would help us determine, who did they suspect first? What did they say first? I think that would help us.
Joe Scott Morgan, jump in.
Yeah. So if we look at these 2 points, Green Toes and the Circa 79 Salon, as it's entitled on the map, guess what you have to do there, Nancy? You have to slow down because this intersects with a major thoroughfare. The critical point is that if there is a stoplight, if there is at those 2 points alone, a stoplight, a stop sign, the individual driving this route, driving that vehicle will have at least had to do a pause. Some people refer to it as a California roll, right? Where you come in, you don't completely stop, and then you go ahead and go. It's not like this vehicle at those 2 spots would blast past it. Past these locations. We go back to Coburger, we think about that 20-mile circle or whatever it was where they're catching these glimpses. That ain't happening here. That individual would have to slow that vehicle down to the point where you can actually capture something. And if there are any more of these kind of intersections along the way, those are going to be critical points, all right, of where the individual would have had to slow down enough where you can actually get a capture off of these cameras. I think that those are going to be very important points. I'm glad that you pointed these out because, look, I mean, you got nothing else to go on. If you look at the elementary school, yeah, it makes kind of a dogleg turn there, but did that stop there, or they just kind of rolling past it? These other places, you've got intersections with a major thoroughfare. They're going to have to slow at least. They're just thinking about their own preservation. They don't want to get T-boned as they're pulling out there. It's just human nature. They're going to have to slow down. That could be a critical point or critical points right there.
And amazingly tonight, Dave Mack has done his own investigation into the route that Annie Guthrie provided and learned something very, very probative. What about it, Dave?
Nancy, remember we had the car that was seen on a Ring camera that was about 2.5 miles from Nancy Guthrie's home, and it was on a back road away from the scene. It was dismissed by the police or the sheriff's department. When I laid that map over, the route on that road does not show up on Annie Guthrie's route for getting away from the scene. But you lay it over and it's right in there. It fits as a possible route that could have been used as the escape route. It's right in the same general area.
And that may answer Cheryl's question as to why Annie came up with this route. That video from our friends at Fox News. You're on cross-examination. Who is our next sponsor? Well, here is a probative clue. Meow. Smalls makes fresh human-grade food designed for cats to thrive, while Big Pet Food uses cheap filler. Smalls features 80% animal protein and zero artificial junk. 88% of cat parents report better digestion, softer fur, and more energy for their cats to play. It's a healthy investment your cat will love. If you want to invest in your cat's health, Smalls is giving you 60% off your cat's first order. 60% off plus free shipping and free treats for life when you go to smalls.com/Nancy, SMALLS, smalls.com/Nancy. 60% off your first order, free shipping, and free treats for life when you head to smalls.com/Nancy. Thanks, Smalls, and thank you from our cat, Cinnamon. And tonight, another theory emerges by a renowned psychologist. Do you buy it? Listen.
Levels of intelligence involved here, which has pointed to me for a very long while now, to a group of people, at least two. There is someone behind the curtain who's more intelligent, more scheming, and then the individual who actually carries it out. Because one of the prime reasons for eliminating a person other than financial is that they know something.
That is our friend, Dr. Gary Bricado. He's an esteemed psychologist, and that is him from a hit on TMZ, our friends Harvey Levin. As much as I think of Bricado, I'm not buying that she was kidnapped or killed somewhere else, and the killer went back to the scene to put her blood on the porch and open and shut the doors. I mean, we have her heart monitor, her pacemaker, placing her there that night. So, Joe Scott Morgan, what do you make of this theory that there's some motive we don't understand, that nobody understands, that she was taken and killed elsewhere, and the perp goes back to the scene to stage, including putting her blood on the front porch?
So the killer, just so that I understand this, actually had the foreknowledge to show up and not just stage the blood, but also
Fresh finds perfectly picked for you. Now and new at Target.
I'm obsessed. Put your boots on. Let's go have fun.
I want this.
We can do what we want. We can do what we want. We can do what we want. We can do what we want.
This is the part where I tell you all the things I want to do to you.
deposit expert there. And what I mean by that is you've got blood that is being blown out of the nose and the mouth. And I'm going to stand by that. There's a close-up. You look at the top right, that cluster. Yeah, right in there. In that tile space right there, you see those big depositions that are like the size of a nickel, perhaps. Those tiny depositions. Nancy, the only way you get that, I mean, I guess the person could have showed up with a turkey baster, maybe drawn up some blood and kind of blasted it out, and then allowed gravitational blood droplets, which would be the nickel-sized stuff, but those tiny little droplets. And let me set the record straight. That's not aspirate.
Put him up, please.
It's expirate. So what that means is that the blood is actually.
You do
blown
hear
out of the
yourself,
nose.
right? The killer came back with a turkey baster full of Nancy Guthrie's blood. Okay. I don't usually cut
I'm
your
saying
mic, but
that
I am
tongue in
sorely tempted. Move forward.
No, listen, it's implausible. The physical science, just looking at those images, by the way, that were generated from a member of the media that walked up and took those pictures because the scene was unsecured. That deposition right there flies in the face of that, Nancy. It really does. And I cannot imagine that whoever this rocket scientist is that did this had the foreknowledge to come in and set this up and stage it up. because that expert up there,
You know,
that's
Joe
not
Scott, while
aspirin.
I've got you, a lot of viewers have questioned the fact that, these photos are from our friends at Fox News, by the way. A lot of viewers have questioned foliage being on top of the blood, which could have happened in any number of ways. But could you weigh in on that before I go to our other guests?
Yeah, because you have, it's just basic physical science. If you have the blood deposition right there, how in the world did the greenery get on top of the blood? I've actually heard people say, well, there's evidence that there are bits of foliage with blood deposited on top of it. So I think that that's going to be a big question here. And again, hey, Nancy, guess what? We don't know because the scene wasn't secured. These images that you're seeing do not come from the police. All right. You've had pizza delivery guys, pool boys.
Okay,
Who
you're
else?
going down the garden path. You're way out in the weeds. Let's get it back in the middle of the road. You don't think that theory works, right? That's what I'm talking about.
No, I don't think it works. Absolutely not.
I mean, you had to really do a backflip and involve a turkey baster to make that theory work. Okay, Cheryl McCollum, what about it? And, Bricado, really smart guy. I don't know where this theory came from. What do you make of it?
If you look at the 90-degree angle drops, some of them are clear in the center or have a half moon. The only way that happens is if they have air. That comes from the nose or the mouth, period. You could not take blood, transfer it, drop it, and have it have that same conclusion. How does the foliage get on top of the blood? That's easy. We see him on video placing that flower clump on top of the camera. At some point, they fell off. That's easy.
Okay, to you, Brian Fitzgibbons, you have gone all around the world finding missing people. I've got a lot of questions for you about Sonora, Mexico, but if you could weigh in on what Bricado said, and again, he is no idiot, but this theory that she was kidnapped or killed in another location and the perp came back to stage the scene to make us think it happened there, it flies in the face of all the physical evidence. You've got to follow the physical evidence, like the blood, like the pacemaker.
I'll defer to Cheryl McCollum and Joe Scott on the forensic side, but what I'll add is someone like Dr. Bricado provides such supporting fires for someone like me in the field. And I'll explain this. An investigator can get locked into a certain hypothesis, a certain theory, right? And where you bring in somebody like Dr. Bricado to present these potential hypotheses, maybe the forensic evidence shoots it down quickly. Maybe it takes a day or two to shoot it down, but it gives another angle for the investigation to look at. And sometimes that creates a breakthrough, right? Because I can say for myself, sometimes I'll get locked into one hypothesis or theory versus another. And someone like that presenting, hey, there's someone controlling this from afar, 1 foot soldier on the ground executing the abduction, right? These are things that might get missed.
And we know tonight that, quote, fresh eyes have been brought in, Fitzgibbons, to take a fresh look at the evidence all over again. And I got to tell you something, Fitz. I'd be stuck in my office at the district attorney's office in downtown Atlanta, and it'd be 8 o'clock at night. I'd be looking at the same thing over and over. And then my investigator, Ernest, we were together over 10 years, only had one fight in 10 years over that POS O.J. Simpson. That said, he'd walk in, say, why are you still here? And I'd tell him, and he would say just out of the blue, well, what about X? He was coming from a different point of view, something fresh. There's nothing wrong with that. And that's what's happening tonight, we're told.
Each employee's healthcare needs are unique. Shouldn't their coverage be as well? Group plans are limited to a single carrier and a few plan options, but people have different medical needs and different budgets. Now, a new form of employer coverage called an ICHRA can help. ICHRAs make health plans personal because employees can buy any plan that meets their needs from any carrier on the marketplace. So plan on personal, plan on an ICHRA. Get coverage you control.
100%. And that's where, a talented individual like Dr. Mercado, hey, Babe Ruth struck out a number of times at home plate, right? He also hit a lot of home runs. So, that's where that experience and brain power comes into play in investigation.
And tonight to Dave Mack, apparently Sheriff Nanos, the sheriff in Pima County, is in, quote, uncharted career territory. A 10-day deadline has run out. He's in hot water yet again. Dave Mack, is this anything like when you get a skunk at a softball game when the other side just doesn't show up? In other words, doesn't sufficiently hand in the filing, so the other side wins?
A lot like that, Nancy. In reality, Nanos was given 10 days to turn in a response to the questions the council had. And what he did was he basically sat down with his lawyer and wrote up excuses for things, but it wasn't under oath. So he turned in basically an undocumented list of excuses for his behavior and the things that he had said, but not under oath. And now the council is having to determine moving forward with his entire future. We told him to do this, but he did that instead. So they're having to make a decision on whether or not they actually pull him back in, put him under oath, and go through this whole process all over again to discuss his previous accusations of lying and misusing his office during an election year.
Cheryl McCollum, don't you know that if they can get rid of him on a technicality, in other words, he didn't properly fill out these forms, he'll get the boot. Right. He'll be taking the pat and turner, pat the street and turn the corner. Bye.
And Nancy, that is only going to serve to hurt this investigation. Somebody would have to come in and they would have to start all over, go through every single thing. That would hamper the investigation, sadly. But let me tell you something. I don't think any of us on this panel has had all the confidence in the world in this sheriff. Statements like, your guess is as good as mine. When he says things like, oh, there's thousands of vehicles at that time of day. We all know that's not possible. He is the one that said, oh, I believe she's still alive. Again, I don't think there's an expert out there that believes Nancy Guthrie is still alive. Nobody being held somewhere. So he's flip-flopped. He's given bad information. He's contradicted himself. There's not a lot of, trust in what he's doing. But anybody would hate to see all of this happening now. I feel for the family. The Guthrie family is not getting what they deserve in this investigation, period.
Oh, goodness, no. But to you, Joe Scott Morgan, I don't know that I agree if it would be such a bad thing for Nanos to be replaced, even though it is midstream.
I don't think that it would be, but we have to look at this from let's take the 30,000-foot view on this, Nancy, and you know this better than anybody. What's this going to bode for the future of the investigation, and for if they hook somebody up on this, what's it going to bode for that prosecution, perhaps? You know that the attorneys will have a field day with this. They'll say that there's, it's rife with incompetence, that you missed evidence, all these sorts of things. And isn't it funny? Isn't it funny how those things that you do at the beginning of any investigation are going to echo through time? And this case in and of itself is a benchmark for that. I got to tell you, Nancy, moving forward with this case, this is actually a case as a college professor that I will present for years to come, saying this is an example, kids, of what not to do. And here we are. We're still in the middle of it, and it just keeps getting more and more bizarre as we go down this road.
Fitz, after there have been a number of, to say it euphemistically, putting perfume on the pig, missteps, translation, screw-ups, is there a way to make a save on this case?
I think there is. There's been a tremendous amount of leads generated, a tremendous amount of digital evidence. And it's important to remember here, there's a game clock on here. And the game clock for the public, 88 days, and for the Guthrie family, it's tremendously heartbreaking. But the FBI controls that game clock. not the perpetrator of this crime. And they have an unlimited amount of time and resources to go through this evidence and find who did this crime. Okay. So that's an important piece to remember here. I don't think hope is lost that justice can be served in this case.
Well, you just said something that is very encouraging, Brian Fitzgibbons. You mentioned the feds. If anybody can crack this case, it's them. But they need you. If you know, or even think you know anything about the disappearance of Mrs. Guthrie, dial toll-free 800-225-5324. Repeat, 800-225-5324. There is a $1.2+ million reward. And if you wish to remain anonymous, 520-882-7463. 520-882-7463. $1.2+ million on the table. And remember, a conviction not required, an arrest not required for you to get the reward. Hi guys, Nancy Grace here. Please join us on Crime Stories and stream it first on Fox 1. When breaking crime news develops, we investigate it and bring it to you. Bombshell updates, answers to unanswered questions from cases making the headlines and cases you may never have heard of until Crime Stories. We go inside investigating.
Leanie wakes up, brushes off the sleep, fumbling for her bagel, this routine to keep. Cigarette smolders by her coffee pot. Mornings ain't easy, but it's all she's got. She's got a wild chat hosted by Maggie. Crazy comments flying, lines go zigzaggy. Leanie takes a breath, bites her breakfast round. Gonna need her fuel when the crazies come round. Oh, Leanie's on the screen, trying not to scream. Maggie's holding down this wild, wild dream. Bagel in her hand, coffee by her side. She's ready for the madness with Maggie as her guide. The chat explodes with every single ding. Leanie's got her caffeine, she can handle anything. Maggie reads the messages, keeping things in line. Leanie laughs it off, says, folks, you're doing fine. Oh, Leanie's on the screen, trying not to scream. Maggie's holding down this wild, wild dream. Bagel in her hand, coffee by her side. She's ready for the madness, with Maggie as a guide. Town, every morning's a game. Leanie plays a host while Maggie calls her names. From the backwards of her room to the front lines of the screen. Life is but a show in this crazy online scene. Oh, Leanie's on the screen, trying not to scream. Maggie's holding down this wild, wild dream. Bagel in her hand, coffee by her side. She's ready for the madness, with Maggie as her guide. Maggie as a guide. In this virtual
and we don't know where. And we need your help.
The disappearance of Nancy Guthrie. From a reported FBI rift to allegations of a small town sheriff mishandling evidence, it's one of the most puzzling cases in recent history. Now, the Pima County Sheriff is telling all, and we're breaking down all the bombshells. This is Scandal, presented by Law and Crime. I'm Sierra Gillespie. It's now been more than 100 days since Nancy Guthrie seemingly vanished into thin air. From afar, it seems like the search is still at a complete standstill, but according to the sheriff heading the investigation, that's not the case. He says it's still a very active investigation, and now he's telling all. From the FBI's involvement to DNA swabs and what the sheriff calls thousands and thousands of videos to sift through, we're breaking down where the investigation is at right now, what the latest details are, and when we could hope to see some answers. At this point, you know the story. 84-year-old Nancy Guthrie, mother to Today Show co-host Savannah Guthrie, was last seen on January 31st at her home in Tucson, Arizona. Now, Nancy had been out to dinner with her son-in-law and her daughter and then returned home. And it was the next day when Nancy didn't show up to church that friends and family started to get a little concerned. That's when Nancy was reported missing. And since then, there's been a lot of information that's come forward, like the now infamous security camera video taken from outside of Nancy's home and a glove that was found nearby. But even with these seemingly strong leads, we still don't know what happened to Nancy or where she is. And enter the Pima County Sheriff. Now, our booking team here at Law and Crime has reached out to him, hoping to sit down one-on-one, ask him all of our burning questions. So far, we haven't heard back, but we do know he has spoken exclusively to People magazine. He told them, quote, "There's frustration because people want to know, but this is just like any other case. Sometimes you solve them within hours or days. Sometimes it takes a long time. My team, I've said all along, they're going to solve this. I fully 100% believe that. But the question is, how will they solve it? According to the sheriff, his team is still getting lots of help from the public. He said, quote, "Right now, I think our focus is on the tips, the leads, and the evidence we have in front of us. Digitally, the camera footages, as well as biological, the DNA, and those type of things." And that's something we see a lot in almost all of our cases. There are security cameras and CCTV everywhere, and a lot of people have Ring or Nest cameras outside of their homes, and all of that evidence is really good, but it can be overwhelming. Back to the sheriff, he said, quote, "There's thousands and thousands of video out there from intersections and Ring cameras that we have to catalog. Maybe it's all the white trucks are over here, all the red sedans are over here. You've got to have it so that when you do find a suspect, hey, the suspect is John Doe. We got it. Now we go and say, well, what else do we know about John Doe?" So to zero in on a suspect, the sheriff says his team begins by building up a digital map and then working backwards to narrow in on the suspect to compare it all to. Oh, he drives a white truck. Were there any white trucks in the area at the time? Oh, John Doe has this cell phone number. You back up to those pieces of evidence that you gathered early on to try to make your case. But on top of all of that digital evidence, like Ring camera or cell phone evidence, there's also DNA. And as we've reported right here on Law and Crime, early on investigators found blood on the crime scene. Now, this was later determined to be Nancy's own blood, but there was other DNA found at the scene too. However, it's yet to be matched with any suspects. The sheriff told People, quote, "I know we have DNA that is unknown who the contributor or depositor is, but I think they're getting closer to finding out who that was. When the labs tell us, hey, there's nothing else we can do, well, then maybe we've got a problem. We've got a cold case. But right now, the labs aren't telling us that." And this is a big criticism, by the way, that the sheriff has faced, that the evidence was allegedly mishandled in the investigation. According to his interview with People magazine, he denies that. About the search, he said, quote, "The plane was started immediately. They found blood. Search and rescue looked at the scene and realized it seemed suspicious. They did exactly what they were supposed to do." There's also been some reports of a rift between local law enforcement, meaning the Pima County Sheriff's Department, and federal investigators, meaning the FBI. Just this month, FBI Director Kash Patel appeared on the Hang Out with Sean Hannity podcast, where he said, quote, "What we, the FBI, do is say, hey, we're here to help. What do you need? What can we do?" And for 4 days, we were kept out of the investigation. However, the sheriff pushes back on all of this. He told People, quote, "Director Patel has his rights to his opinions, but the FBI was with us day one. We've always had a working relationship." So according to the sheriff, state and federal investigators are still hard at work. He didn't really give us hard and fast specifics, which we're going to dive into during today's interview, so stick around for that. But the sheriff did mention the mounting pressure of it all. He said, nobody wants to make a false arrest. Nobody wants to falsely accuse somebody. At some point in time, someday, we may have somebody in a courtroom that deserves his or her right to have a fair and impartial trial. The way you get that is through a fair and impartial investigation. But at this point, we the public feel no closer to having any answers. The sheriff mentions that and the difficulty the Guthrie family too must be experiencing. He said, quote, "The public is frustrated. Even the Guthrie family, every passing second must feel like 100 days because they don't know. What matters is moving forward carefully so we don't make mistakes or falsely accuse somebody or make a bad arrest." And we can't forget the level of star power behind this case. Millions of Americans regularly wake up with Savannah Guthrie in their kitchens. I mean, starting their day off with the Today Show. And for her own mother to disappear, the publicity of this missing persons case was giant. So too were the allegations of ransom requests that even the Guthries have addressed in posts on social media.
We too have heard the reports about a ransom letter in the media. As a family, we are doing everything that we can. We are ready to talk. However, we live in a world where voices and images are easily manipulated. We need to know, without a doubt, that she is alive and that you have her. We want to hear from you, and we are ready to listen. Please reach out to us.
Savannah Guthrie herself has been outspoken, saying her family has received numerous ransom demands, but only 2 that could possibly be authentic. She said on a recent appearance on the Today Show, quote, "Well, the investigation is still going, and people have worked tirelessly, and we see that, but we need answers. We cannot be at peace without knowing." Since Nancy's disappearance, the FBI has reported receiving at least 13,000 tips. Since then, according to the sheriff's recent interview, the tips have not stopped. He said, quote, "We still get calls, we still get tips, even if the tip is from last night, 102 days later, because it might be somebody calling saying, somebody in this neighborhood doesn't look right. We tell our folks here in Pima County, if you see something suspicious to you, call us." All right, so the sheriff answered some questions, but I still have so many more, like namely, where is Nancy? Let's bring on today's guest to ask that question and so many more. It's retired police sergeant Troy Hillman, author of Chasing Down the Zombie Hunter, the true story of a small town accountant, an elite group of detectives, and Arizona's most terrifying cold case. And as you heard there, Troy is out of Arizona where all of this is happening. So Troy, great to see you. Thank you for coming on Scandal. And let's start with the newest info, the fact that the sheriff has come out, dropped a couple of bombshells in his exclusive interview with People magazine. What were your big takeaways from that interview?
Yeah, it was interesting. I think it was time for some form of update. It's been over the 100-day mark, so I think it was incumbent upon him to say something. But basically, he kind of revisited some of the same topics that he'd already covered, which was, they're still reviewing video evidence, they're still looking at the DNA, they're still reviewing the tips. So to me, there was some nuggets of maybe possible new information, but there really wasn't a lot. It was just kind of like, hey, we haven't forgotten about this. We're working hard. And, it takes a lot of time to go through all this information.
Yeah, it's tricky. He's in a tough spot because honestly, everyone wants answers. Of course, the Guthrie family, number one, paramount, but all of America and honestly, maybe even parts of the world have been watching this case, assuming that it would be wrapped up much sooner than it is. Like your point, it's been more than 100 days since all of this. And something I found interesting in the interview with the sheriff is that he said, my team is going to solve it. I've said it from day one. I'm confident we're going to solve it. That to me, I mean, he's got confidence, but is it too far to say, nope, we're almost there, we're going to solve it? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I always told my families, don't give up hope. There's new advances, new techniques. All you need is one little morsel of information to lead you in a certain direction, and then the whole case could unravel and you could solve it. So never give up. But also, and I hope when he's including his team, it's also the federal's, authorities, because I know there's been a little bit of a beef between the local and feds at this point. Some things have been said. So, I think, don't give up hope. It's not by no means what we call a cold case at this point. And you just got to keep looking at information and finding that missing puzzle piece. It's somewhere in there.
Yeah, I mean, you never know what is going to be the thing that really triggers, okay, the waterfall, essentially. Like this one little tip leads to all these other things, and all of a sudden we have our suspect. So you're right, I think, in saying never give up hope. They're still investigating it. But something you pointed out too, this is kind of interesting. With this case, there has been beef, as you called it, between the local, so the Pima County Sheriff's Department, and then the federal, meaning the FBI here. And okay, so I'm just going to take you back. I love Criminal Minds. It's one of my favorite shows ever. It's about the behavioral analysis unit of the FBI. And they always talk about in the show, they say like, well, we have to be invited in by the locals. Is that true? Would the Pima County Sheriff's Department need to invite the feds in for this case? Because according to the FBI director himself, we were there, we were ready to go, but for 4 days, Pima County didn't want us there. Whereas the Pima County Sheriff says we had them from the start. So long question, do they have to be invited in, the FBI?
That's a great question. It's a tough one, but technically it is the jurisdiction of knowing what they knew at the time. It was the county sheriff. That was their investigation. If they had direct evidence that the perpetrator or the victim had gone across state lines, then the FBI could intercede. And there's also, if this looked more like a kidnapping, the FBI would have jurisdiction. But typically it's a kind of a meeting of the minds. The FBI is there to basically provide resources, such as, their labs, their digital forensic experts, the BAU, which you referred to come in. But at that point, the first couple of days were bizarre because it started out just as a missing person, and then it led to, hey, there's blood, there's evidence of that she was abducted, and then it just kind of unfolded from there. So, the truth is probably somewhere in the middle, but between each side. But unfortunately, things, there are egos in law enforcement that get involved. So sometimes, those come into play.
It's tricky because, to your point, when this first started, a lot of people were thinking, okay, this is an 84-year-old woman. We have something in our country, called Silver Alert, where it's somebody who maybe has, dementia or Alzheimer's. We've seen this where, they get lost or they get confused or they're sundowners. So at first everyone kind of was like, okay, does she maybe, does she have dementia? Does she have something? And then immediately the sheriff is like, no, she's smart as a whip. It has nothing to do with that. Savannah Guthrie and her family came out and said, no, she's sharp as a tack, I think that they said, and it's nothing to do with that. And then you're right. We saw the blood. We saw the video from the Ring camera, so much going on. And so I can understand how everyone, FBI, local law enforcement, everyone wants an answer. But to your point, there are egos involved in all of this. And that's another thing too, is that the Pima County Sheriff himself has received kind of a lot of flack for this, because people are saying, what is taking so long? It's been more than 100 days. Is this guy just not prepared for all of this? It's small town Tucson. Was he not prepared for this national manhunt situation? I mean, what are your thoughts with that? And again, I'm not trying to cast stones. I know that this is a really uphill battle, and it seems to me that he wants Nancy found and is working hard toward it. But what do you think about the criticism that he's faced?
Yeah, I think he was put in a bad spot from the start. You know, I know if it was me personally, I would have had probably my public information officers who are more adept at speaking to the media, cover a lot more of the detailed and the nuances of the investigation. And I kind of would have stayed high level had I been the sheriff. But then again, that's my opinion. So, you know, I think he was trying, I think he's genuinely a good guy, and he's trying to put out information as best he can. And I think at the beginning, maybe he put out a little bit too much because there is a delicate balance between, you know, you don't want to put out too much because it sends the investigation down certain tunnels or certain avenues that you don't want it to go. So, you know, I always call it a tightrope, because you're trying to give the community information. You've got all kinds of influencers, you've got all kinds of social media, you've got internet sleuths trying to figure this out, and they want to help, but you have to kind of balance that with, hey, let's let our investigators do their job and methodically plod through this investigation, because ultimately they're the ones that are going to have to testify in court if and when, you know, she's found, and then if and when we get the perpetrator.
Yeah, and that's something that the sheriff said too in his interview is, you know, we have to maintain the integrity of all of this, because let's say this does go to a courtroom one day, if there's a trial, to your point, these people are going to have to testify that they follow the protocol, they follow the procedure. So, you know, in the end, everyone wants justice. If there is some sort of criminal case here, we need to make sure that everything is right. And I guess when I'm hearing about this, it kind of jogged my memory when you were talking about, you know, walking that tightrope. If we go back to the Idaho 4, this happened in November 2022. 4 college kids are murdered. If you recall from that time, everyone was like, what is going on? The Moscow Police Department, get your stuff together, you guys. Like, you're giving us nothing. And then all of a sudden they're like, oh, a month later, we've had this guy, Brian Koberger. We've been searching after him for a long time. We just couldn't tell you, the public. So I'm wondering, is it possible that it's something like that we, the public, are like, oh my God, Pima County, get it together, when in reality, they have more info than they're letting on?
Yeah, totally. We probably know 25% of what they know, and that's by design. It's not they're trying to be malicious or trying to, you know, not communicate with the community, but they're trying to hold back because what they don't want is somebody to go try to put themselves in danger. If they were to leak who the perpetrator was, they would maybe go and confront them, and then that would be a bad situation. So you want to let the police do what they do and what they're trained to do, and methodically do it. So I've never thought. I think they're working diligently on this case. I think they've pulled in the resources they've needed to work it, and so that's never been a question to me. But again, that's based on my law enforcement background.
And honestly, the sheer amount of tips that they've received, it's in the thousands that they have. The sheriff himself said, we're going through thousands and thousands of video. So to me, I mean, even part of that, it's been 100 days and people are like, okay, the clock is ticking. But is it just potentially that there's an overwhelming amount of evidence? I mean, even for my job, sometimes I have to go through videos and body cam, for instance, it can be hours and hours. And if you're going frame by frame, because anything could be a clue, I mean, could that be what's taking so much time?
Yeah, absolutely. And I go back to the canal murders that we spent 3.5 years as a cold case group solving. We had around about 1,000 tips on a list, and trying to go through each what we call creepy guy and vet them out and say, hey, do we want to go get this guy's DNA? Do we not? It takes a lot of time because you don't want to miss anything, but you also have to keep moving forward. So yeah, it's massive. And the amount of cameras that are out there now in streets, intersections, and businesses and residences, you have to look through each one of those. And yeah, it takes a tremendous amount of manpower to pour through all that. And then the tips that come in, because some of them are just downright silly, but other ones have some meat, or if they've called back several times and have further information, those need to be looked at more. So my guess is, they're just going back through that list and saying, okay, let's
Let's
isolate the ones that are really good that we need to go back and revisit.
Yeah, it's tough because it's so great that everyone has Ring cameras. I mean, it has helped solve so many crimes, and we have things caught on cam and, you know, the CCTV, everything great. But at the same time, to your point, overwhelming with the amount that they have to go through. I mean, I'm just thinking about the city block outside of my house. The amount of cameras that are out in, you know, this one block would be, you know, at least a dozen. So, I mean, it's hard when you're talking about such a long time frame and going through there's just a lot to go through. And I guess now the questions I have to ask you are a bit more asking you to speculate, because we're talking about somebody who may have done this. With your background, you know, for profiling a suspect or suspects, what type of person do you think would have done something like this?
You know, this one's one of the most challenging investigations that I've ever kind of read about. And again, I don't have the case file. I don't have access to all the information they have. So it's really hard for me to say. But looking at the video, if that truly was the abductor, it looked kind of junior varsity in terms of the stuff he was wearing, how he was wearing things, you know, the holster, the gloves, you know, trying to cover the camera. So to me, that it's odd. I find it so odd that nobody called in saying, hey, I know who that is. I know how to walk. I know, you know, the eyebrows. I know, you know, that person shops at Walmart where the stuff was allegedly purchased. To me, that's just odd that nobody then, and that may speak to he's from out of town. You know, there's different paths you could go down. I mean, you know, this could go, I mean, any different direction. This could be, I have to look at motive. And to me, I keep coming back to the motive would be something with Savannah, because she's famous. And then, so, you know, somehow in her life, and I, again, don't want to blame her, but I've heard speculation about this, but somehow somebody wants to get even with her or wanted to stop her from doing something, or, you know, that to me would be the motive.
Oh, that's it's so hard, because I mean, I'm not going to say the same job as her at all, but I also am a reporter front facing, and just from like people who are in my Instagram, you know, DMs or comments, sometimes people feel like they know you, or some people feel like, you know, we're pals. Some people hate these, you know, and she is on this national, if not international stage in people's living rooms, in their kitchens. So maybe people do feel like they really know Savannah Guthrie. She, you know, people know where she's from. She has a whole Wikipedia page. They can go back and look at her mom, who was on the Today Show, and not her fault at all, but it makes things a lot more complicated. And I guess that leads into the toughest question I can ask you here is, what do you speculate happened? I mean, some people have talked about Mexican involvement. Also the desert of Arizona. Could Nancy be there? I mean, there's so many different routes that this could go. What are just your thoughts?
Well, I just know that trying to move whether or not she was alive when you know she left the property, but everything I read was she was not very ambulatory, able to walk really well. So trying to move her to a distance, she had to have been moved to me in a car. So it's bizarre that nobody, you know, no Ring cameras in the neighborhoods picked up, you know, that car. Maybe it has. You know, I don't think she was dragged out in the desert. That would have been considerably difficult. I think she was maybe put in a vehicle and transported. That would be my thought. As to where it is hard to say. It is odd that there's a huge reward out. I mean, it grew to over $1 million, and nobody, you know, has basically, you know, step forward to claim that. So that's odd to me too. There's just so many odd pieces to this investigation that, you know, hopefully it'll all eventually they'll put it together somehow. You know, it's hard to say if Nancy's safe at this point. It's not looking good because of her medical history and her need for medicine, but who knows? But hopefully, you know, resolution, she'd come back alive, and then you'd find the perpetrator and you'd hold them accountable, and then we'd have the missing pieces of this puzzle. But yeah, this is I'm just going to say it. It's a hell of an investigation.
No, it really is. And I mean, to your point, we have seen miracle cases. Elizabeth Smart was rescued after almost a year. JC Lee Dugard, I think, was 18 years. And then, these perpetrators were able to be prosecuted. So miracles do happen. It's possible. And I hope for a positive resolution for the Guthrie family, because this must have been, and ongoing is just really, really tough to have to talk about. Or really, like you said, a hell of an investigation, a crazy, crazy case. Troy Hillman, thank you for coming on Scandal and talking with us about it today.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Sierra.
If you have any information about the whereabouts of Nancy Guthrie or have any sort of tip, please report it to the Pima County Sheriff's Department or the FBI. And if you want to do a full deep dive into this case, make sure to download the Law and Crime Plus app, where we have all of the Guthrie case files there for you to go through. And that is where today's episode of Scandal leaves us for now. If you like what you saw and you want to see more or connect with me on social media, you can find me on places like Instagram at Sierra Gillespie. Thanks for watching today's episode of Scandal. As always, I'm your host, Sierra Gillespie, and I'll see you next time.
My show, really appreciate it. Please click to subscribe. I really appreciate all of the support. It's now been 104 days since Nancy Guthrie vanished from her home in Tucson, Arizona. New in this episode, there's a new interview with the sheriff where he shares some new information. First of all, he says that he's no longer communicating with the Guthrie family directly, which I found to be interesting. Also, why he still has hope in the DNA evidence and what for him would make this a cold case, which is the first time I've ever heard him really talk about the possibility of a cold case. I'm going to get into all of it in this episode of Brian Ensign Investigates. All right, hey guys, so I want to go through some of these new things that Sheriff Nanos said. He was speaking to People Magazine. I actually know the reporter. I met her when I was out there. She was also out there for a couple weeks right after Nancy went missing. And some of this stuff is interesting. I mean, there's some new developments here. And that's the thing about Sheriff Nanos that I've found is, when you can talk to him, if he'll answer his phone or whatever, sometimes he'll just start talking and he'll start saying things and you're like, oh, wow, some of this stuff is new, which seems like is kind of what happened here with this People Magazine interview. So I'm going to get to Morgan Wright, former investigator and law enforcement expert, in a minute to kind of go over what some of this means. But let me walk you through some of this. This stood out to me the most. According to People Magazine and their discussion with the sheriff, he is no longer directly communicating with the Guthrie family and says those conversations are being handled by the FBI, which is interesting because remember initially it appeared that he was having communication with Savannah and with the Guthrie family, and he is technically in charge of the investigation still as the sheriff of Pima County. Remember, it was never handed over to the FBI. So the fact that he is acknowledging that he is no longer directly communicating with the Guthrie family and says those conversations are being handled by the FBI, there's been a lot of curiosity. Is Savannah Guthrie, are the Guthries getting frustrated with the sheriff based on all of this reporting that's been out there, that I've done, that's been out there, mistakes that have been made? Could they be frustrated or were they still talking to him and happy behind the scenes? And it sounds like they're, according to the sheriff, no longer directly communicating with the sheriff. So I found that to be very interesting. And that is something new that I didn't know. He said, quote, and this is the sheriff, "The public is frustrated, even the Guthrie family." So they're also acknowledging that the Guthrie family is frustrated, which how can you blame them? I mean, I think that even though they haven't said that outright, how could they not be frustrated? I mean, it's now been more than 3 months and they still have no resolution. They have no idea where Nancy is. And at the same time, there's sort of this controversy that continues to develop around the sheriff throughout this whole thing. So there he's acknowledging the public is frustrated. Even the Guthrie family is frustrated. Every passing second must feel like 100 days because they don't know. What matters is moving forward carefully so we don't make any mistakes or falsely accuse somebody or make a bad arrest. Interesting you said that, because remember when I was there were 2 times where they didn't specifically falsely accuse someone, but they detained people, the time in Rio Rico and then the time close to Nancy's house. So he's saying that they don't want to make mistakes like that again, I guess. But interesting that he's saying that even the Guthrie family is frustrated. That's new. In terms of DNA, this is new. This is what he said. I know we have DNA that is unknown who the contributor or depositor is, but I think they're getting closer to finding out who that was, adding that he has confidence in our labs. So the fact that he said they are getting closer to finding out who that was, that's optimistic. That's promising. I mean, I hope that's true behind the scenes. We know that they had the hair strand, that they were looking at the rootless hair, and that they were attempting to do genetic genealogy, investigative genetic genealogy, when they look at bigger family trees and try to narrow it down. So that's promising that he said that he thinks they're getting closer to finding out who that was. He says when the labs tell us, hey, there's nothing else we can do, well, then maybe we've got a problem, we've got a cold case. But right now, the labs aren't telling us that. Interesting to hear him actually say cold case, that then he believes they'd have a cold case. Gosh, I hope it doesn't get to that point. But that just goes back to everything that I've been reporting from my sources close to the investigation, who have said that, you know, they're waiting on this DNA, but there's really not a lot that they're going on right now. They don't have a suspect. They don't have any solid leads. And he's kind of acknowledging that right now. They're waiting on the DNA. And if that doesn't work out, then maybe we've got a problem. We've got to go cold case, he said. So sort of good news in a way, that they are still waiting on the DNA, folks, and that they haven't ruled anything out and the labs aren't telling them that they've got a problem, but also kind of not the best news if you think about it from the perspective of what if they aren't able to get anything off that hair, or if they have other samples that we don't know about. Does that mean that they then have a cold case based on what the sheriff said? Digital evidence, he says this includes thousands and thousands of videos, digitally camera footage, he says, at the center of the investigation, an enormous catalog of surveillance footage from intersections, neighborhoods, businesses, home security systems. He said, this is a quote, there's thousands and thousands of video out there from intersections and ring cameras that we have to catalog. Maybe it's all the white trucks are over there, all the red sedans are over here. You've got to have it so when you do find a suspect, hey, the suspect is John Doe, we got him, now we'll go say, well, what else do we know about John Doe? So that's not entirely new. We knew that they were looking through all the traffic cameras, and apparently they're cataloging all the vehicles. So even though they don't know who the suspect is or what vehicle the suspect was driving or suspects, it sounds like he's saying once they figure that out, hopefully when they figure that out, they'll be able to quickly go back and identify some of these cars on these traffic cams around the time that Nancy went missing. He also talked about false arrests. Nobody wants, this is a quote, nobody wants to make a false statement. Nobody wants to falsely accuse someone. At some point in time, someday, we may have somebody in a courtroom that deserves his or her right to a fair and impartial trial. The way you get that is through a fair and impartial investigation. My team, I've said all along, they're going to solve this. I fully 100% believe that. Again, I just think back to Rio Rico and the other bust near Nancy's house when, you know, remember that federal search warrants had people in custody and that didn't pan out. So it sounds like they don't want that to happen again. And by the way, we still have never seen that federal search warrant, which I'm still waiting to get my hands on to figure out why they were able to do that. What sort of evidence did they have to connect Nancy Guthrie to those folks? Because apparently none of it panned out, you know? It seems like that had nothing to do with the investigation. This is interesting. He also talked about FBI tension, which has been something I've talked a lot about on my podcast and on News Nation. Remember from the beginning, I've been reporting that there was tension between the Pima County Sheriff's Office and the FBI. And then you had Kash Patel, the FBI director, coming out and saying that they were kept out of the investigation for the first 4 days, that the sheriff wanted to send the DNA to his private lab in Florida that they use and not to Quantico, which, by the way, if you go back to my episode from yesterday, Dr. Hines, one of the county supervisors, said he wishes that they would have gone with the FBI just because of the money aspect, that he believes that the Nancy Guthrie case has already cost the county $1 million, and that if they had just let the FBI take the DNA and handle the investigation, it would have saved the county a lot of money, which is something that I hadn't heard discussed before. So he said it would have been better for the investigation because it's the FBI and they have more experience, but it also would have been better for the county because they would have saved a ton of money, $1 million, he's saying, if it had gone to the FBI. But this is what Sheriff Nano said in this new interview about FBI tension. He says he denied the claim of tension between the FBI and his agency. He says coordination between his officers and the FBI began soon after learning of Nancy's disappearance. He said Director Patel has his right to his opinions, adding that he believes some remarks were factually inaccurate. He says the FBI was with us day one. We've always had a working relationship. He also disputed claims that investigators mishandled the scene or delayed search efforts in the critical early hours of the Guthrie investigation. Again, this is according to his interview with People magazine. The plan was started immediately, he said, referring to aerial. The plane was started immediately. Nano said, referring to aerial search operations. They found blood, search and rescue looked at the scene and realized it seemed suspicious. They did exactly what they were supposed to do. So he's saying that they did search initially with the plane and then realized that it was suspicious because they found the blood and then moved on to, realizing that this was a criminal matter. So it's interesting that the sheriff is speaking out. Hey guys, I'm always on the go. I don't usually have much time for cooking, and that is why I absolutely love Factor. And Factor is the sponsor of today's video. Factor doesn't just ask you to meal prep because they have done the work for you, and it is real food. Factor is made by chefs and designed all sorts.
If you do 25 leg raises a day, your apron belly will go bye-bye. If you do 25 leg presses a day, your peach will get nice and
sorts of other illegal activities. And that is where Incogni comes in. It is a personal data removal service. And the best part is it's so easy. Signing up online, it literally took me 1 minute. They also have this thing called a removal feature, and one of Incogni's privacy agents will take care of like the FBI has more control than people realize. And something that makes me believe that too is this new information that the sheriff isn't even talking to the Guthries, that it's the FBI talking to the Guthries, which, if the sheriff was really in charge of the whole thing and had all this, special information, you'd think that the Guthries would be wanting to talk to the sheriff. But no, according to him, they're now only talking to the FBI. So I want to bring in Morgan right now. Super smart guy, investigator. I've had him on the podcast before, and just a law enforcement expert to kind of go through some of these new developments and see what he thinks about it. Thank you for joining me, Morgan. I really appreciate it. It's been a while since I've talked to you, so I have kind of a lot of questions because you're up to speed on all this Guthrie stuff. The first thing I wanted to ask you about, though, there's this new interview with the sheriff with People magazine, and there are a couple things that stood out to me. I'm curious your take on. First of all, Sheriff Nano said that he is no longer directly communicating with the Guthrie family and says those conversations are now being handled by the FBI. And then he said, quote, the public is frustrated, even the Guthrie family. He's technically still in charge of the investigation. I mean, technically his office is still in charge. And what do you make of the fact that he's not communicating with the family anymore?
Yeah, until it becomes until there's a federal predicate, or a nexus, and the FBI, for example, if she was kidnapped and we knew she was taken across state lines, that makes it a federal investigation. In my experience, and Brian, this is going on over 40 years, it's unusual for the originating agency, the investigative agency who has originating authority, which the sheriff does, not to be in communication with the victim's family. It would be hard to figure out, well, why, how come? The record, there's enough out there on the record, as they say, there's enough in the interviews, you can see stuff to where it's kind of like, this may be in an advanced stage. Maybe there's something going on we don't know about, which clearly falls within the FBI's swim lane. This is what we do. We do this really well. I have no idea what it is, but let's say it's an advanced hostage negotiation or an advanced negotiation. That's clearly something. But to not have any contact is something that I think that's a question that ought to be answered. The question is, you say you don't have contact. The question is why?
Right. Yeah. I've wondered, and I obviously tried with my coverage, try to be really respectful to the family and think about what they're going through. But I have wondered sort of behind the scenes, like, with all this reporting about the sheriff and mistakes made and all the drama with him and the board of supervisors, they must know about it. And it's just sort of a distraction from, Nancy being missing.
Yeah, the cases I worked, you always wanted to make sure that you had contact with the family. When I was a detective working, I remember a homicide case. Guy was run over 8 times with his own car, drug deal gone bad. Yeah, he shouldn't have been out there, but we advised him. Here's what happened. We just served a search warrant. We made some arrests. You always want to be the person that breaks the news to them. You never want them finding out about it from another source. And look, reporters got to do their job. But it's like you and I've talked about, and I've told other people, look, when you don't feed the beast, and the beast is media, they will go out and find things to report on because it's a newsworthy story. So I think that's just one of the first rules of investigations and working with the family is that maintain constant contact, always keep open lines of communication, because guess what? At some point, you're going to need their help. Let's say that a case is made. You're going to need their help in building the case, testifying, potentially providing evidence. So you always want to make sure you're on good terms with them.
The DNA I've reported, there's a strand of hair that was found that's rootless, that's now been sent to Quantico that they're trying to get DNA off of. In this new interview, he said, I know we have DNA that is unknown who the contributor or depositor is, but I think they're getting closer to finding out who that was. I have confidence in our labs. When the labs tell us, hey, there's nothing else we can do, well, then maybe we've got a problem. We've got a cold case. But right now, the labs aren't telling us that. Are you confident that they're going to get somewhere with this DNA testing? What does your gut say there?
Well, there's kind of a contradiction. On the one hand, he says 100% we're going to solve this. On the other hand, says, hey, we may not get anything from the lab and it'll be a cold case. So, it's got to be one or the other. Here's the issue, though, Brian. It goes back to you and I have talked about this. I've talked about it, many times. It's like it goes back to the crime scene. DNA does not come with a date and time stamp on it. You don't know when that hair was deposited or by who. We don't know by who, obviously. The fact that the crime scene was uncontrolled for a certain period of time, could that have been introduced? There's a thing, too, called Locard's evidence transfer theory, which basically says anytime you come into contact with something, you leave something and you take something. That's how touch DNA works. If you and I shook hands, I get some of your epithelial cells, skin cells. I go open a door somewhere, your DNA now is on that door, but you have to put it in context. So with this hair, when he says, hey, we're getting closer, the analysis is already done. That kind of leads to me is that they are going down the path of familial DNA or investigative genetic genealogy, that there's something being done, because that's the thing that takes time. It could be anywhere. We saw in the Kohlberger case, it took a few months. Golden State Killer case took a few months. In the case of, a lot of people don't know this case, but April Tinsley, a young girl kidnapped back in Indiana, I think it was in the late 80s, killed. The killer taunted them with message. Well, they finally got some DNA. The technology caught up. They were only one step away. The DNA led them to the brother. The brother led them to the actual killer. So sometimes you get lucky, and it's kind of like you're one step away. On this, though, I think there's, again, it's the originating agency, the agency of record, which is the sheriff's office, gets to make the decisions because it's their case. But in my experience and the cases I work, man, anytime I could take advantage of somebody else's technology, especially when it's going to be a big case, and they've got the expertise. I always wanted to do, I worked with everybody from our own state labs when I was in Kansas, KBI, to the FBI lab, to Quantico, to ATF on firemark examinations, ATF on bomb and arson investigations. So you always try to find who's got that expertise, and then let's use that expertise.
Are you surprised that it doesn't seem there's more items with DNA? And what does that mean? I mean, and there could be more that we just don't know about, but from my understanding, it seems like this hair is really the focus.
Yeah. So when I go back and you've looked at the videos I have, millions of people have looked at the videos, right? You look at the tradecraft that was done, a full face covering, ski mask. You've got a jacket covering everything, gloves, look like double gloves, right? If there was a hair there, it would have to have been on the outside of, you think it would most likely would have come from, and a logical place to come from is from the outside of that, like the ski mask or something else. Then you have a real problem, because that could have been picked up anywhere and deposited. So now you have a red herring. So we don't know what we know till we know what we don't know. It sounds corny, but it's the actual truth. We're dealing with uncertainty here. Now, uncertainty is okay, but it's got to be framed in the proper way. Is that a lot of people are saying this is the silver bullet, this will lead us to the killer. We heard that about the gloves. I think it was the New York Post. Oh, we found gloves.
Yeah.
We're watching it. And guess what? it was a nothing burger. It turned out to, as I said, and actually I was on with Elizabeth Vargas. I said, hey, look, those gloves mean absolutely nothing until they're tied to the crime scene, and they never were, so they mean nothing. And so, yeah, this is the DNA. It used to be, Brian, back, I hate to say back in my day, but my testimony was enough. I mean, the fact that I testified, that was evidence. Then people started watching TV, and then the perception changed. Well, you can't clear a case unless it has DNA. You actually can. It takes some work. DNA sometimes, touch DNA can absolutely be misleading. Your DNA on a doorknob that you in a building you've never been in means absolutely nothing now because you were never there. So we have to put everything in context. It will be interesting to see where the if that's and I'm pretty sure that's what they're doing. The investigative genetic genealogy, where they're at with that. I mean, it's at least that's a 60 to 90 day process just to get a good feel for what's the landscape, who's out there, who's who in the zoo, who's connected to who.
It's been a while since I've talked to you about this case. I think it's been more than a month. Where is your mind at overall? I mean, we talked last time about the possibility of, is the ransom real? Was it a burglary gone wrong? As more time has gone on, and I'm asking you to kind of speculate here because there's a lot we just don't know based on the evidence. But like, where's your mind at on all of this?
Well, funny you should mention that. I'm not trying to. It's not done yet, but Brian, I've taken a lot of the stuff that I've done, but it's going into a whole thing called Crime Reconstructed, a first principle method for criminal investigations. The thing I lead off with is the Guthrie case, and we talk about that. What are the things that are known? What are the what is known and what is knowable? But in the case of this, I go back to, it was either a burglary gone wrong or it was never a burglary, right? For a burglary to gone wrong, different skill set, different mindset. You're in there with a different mission. A burglary is about theft and removal. Kidnapping is about control. So the longer this goes on, the fact that you got a $1.2 million reward that has not moved the needle whatsoever. You look at the blood that comes out and stops at the curb. And actually I put a little piece of analysis out, probably mid-March or something. But what I wanted to address is the question of why was the guy messing with the camera? He was not concerned about being found. In fact, we have the other photo. We were trying to figure out that. I know the sheriff said one thing, FBI said another. Was it a reconnaissance video? The guy just standing there, dressed similarly, but differently, a little bit different attire. The whole purpose of removing the Ring camera, and this is what I've concluded based on looking at anything, was he disguised himself. What he could not disguise was a vehicle. So you remove the camera because you don't want it transmitting a picture of the vehicle, because we know that the blood stopped at the exact place a vehicle would have had to have been for Nancy to be put into a car. The question was there one or was there two? So when I look at this, and this is based on my training and experience, and it's not speculation. So I want, some people may say, well, it's speculation. No, it's actually based on real data, stuff that I've done, stuff that comes out of the National Crime Victimization Survey, stuff that the FBI does. You would be hard pressed to find cases of where somebody that went in to do a burglary decided that kidnapping was the least risky alternative to getting out of the house, because then you have to plan for it. You have to plan for control and exfiltration. And that gets back into the videos. I know we'll talk about that in a minute. But so as time goes on, when I was out there, I said, and that was not too long after it happened, I think a few days after, I was in Tucson for 4 days. And I said, you got to quit treating this as a missing person. It's not. It's a no-body homicide. There's enough indicators to say it's a no-body homicide. Her age, her cardiac condition, the time of night she was taken out, the blood. This is a no-body homicide. So I think when you look at it, there's very little, if anything, to indicate that it's a burglary gone wrong. Circumstantially, all the evidence points to an abduction. Now, then the question becomes, was it a targeted abduction? Did they know who she was and who she was connected to? That's the part that's unknowable. Nobody can tell you. The only person that can tell you that is the person who committed the offense.
It's so interesting you say that. All this time, I haven't really put a lot of thought into what you said, that it could have been taking the camera off to conceal the car, not to actually be worried about the camera.
Well, and Brad, look, he stood out there. You and I saw him. He stood out there. He wasn't worried. He walked up. He had the bite light. He was putting the vegetation in front. He was standing there for enough time. Had the camera been recording to the cloud, it would have been captured for posterity. These guys have operated, and look, he's definitely exhibiting some some sophisticated tradecraft. Let me put it that way. This is not his first rodeo doing this. So he's not worried about being identified. What I think it is he's worried about the vehicle being identified, because a vehicle is easy to track. Somebody in a ski mask, all of the people who use, Brian, and you get it worse than I do because of your profile and the number of viewers that you have. But I'm sure you get emails and messages all the time. Hey, look at this. I reversed engineered this, or I did this. It's like, none of that works. The thing that I keep coming back to is you look where the blood goes, you look where the blood stops, she's in a vehicle. The real question there is, was it one or was it two people involved in this? But I go back to, I think it was a targeted abduction, whether it was a known targeted abduction, like they intended to target Nancy Guthrie as opposed to a lady living in a high, a rent area. That's the part that's unknown, but definitely he was not worried about being seen. He was more worried about the vehicle being identified, because that's easy to do. I'm telling you, I worked a fatality accident one time as a state trooper. All I had was a little piece of the grill. And from that, we were able to reconstruct the actual year, make, model, got a partial VIN number, and we tracked it down. We actually found the vehicle from just a little piece of the grill. And in this day of AI and everything, they would have been able to identify the exact vehicle. Then when you do that, guess what? Then you go into your files. The sheriff's office, the PD would have gone in. Who do we have that we know is a bad guy that's driving a 92 Honda or an 84 Acura, whatever the case might be, right? That would have been a biometric from a vehicle standpoint. That would have been completely identifiable. That's why he didn't care about being seen himself. That's why the camera was removed before she was brought out.
Yeah, and it's interesting you bring about them going into their files. The sheriff also talked about this, that they've got thousands of videos, cameras. There's thousands and thousands of video out there from intersections and ring cameras that we have to catalog, he said. Maybe it's all the white trucks over here, the red sedans over there. It's so that if when we have a suspect, we can say, hey, suspect John Doe, we got him. Now we'll go back and look at all the different vehicle. I mean, is that typical in an investigation like this, that they be cataloging all of the cars from the traffic cameras?
It's a step you would take, but I think it's inverted. See, my theory, look, I did some stuff for, after 9/11, I did some stuff in the DOD community, the intelligence community, the justice community. Everybody said this is like looking for a needle in a haystack. I said, guys, you've got the wrong mentality. Your theory is make the haystack smaller. My theory is use a bigger magnet, pull it out. I would instead reverse it. I would say, look, you've got all this video. Well, we know the vehicle wouldn't have left no later than probably 2:28. That's when the last ping from the pacemaker was to the phone, somewhere between 2:12 and 2:28. It's very simple. And it's I actually did this, and I think did it with one of your anchors, but I showed the egress analysis. I said, these are the ways out of that area.
Yeah.
How do you get 5 miles out, right? I'd simply reverse it. I'd say, what vehicle traffic do I have in this time window? And I would slide this window through, and I would say, what vehicles do I have going through? Those are my vehicles of interest. Now I work backwards from the vehicles I have targeted, not waiting for somebody to go, hey, we arrested John Smith in a white Toyota. Now let's go back and look for the white Toyotas. You still have to catalog that stuff, because if a break comes in, you want that. But I would have a team working the inversion of that, which is, I want to know all the vehicles. Here's our window of opportunity. I want to know every vehicle that was going through this window of opportunity. And that's a much smaller subset than trying to catalog, umpteen million videos.
How is it possible that with that doorbell video, where you can still see the eyebrows and you can see the mouth and you can see the way he walks and the clothing and the backpack, and how is it possible that we still don't, that at least according to the sources I have, there's still no suspect, there's no real good lead? It's almost like it still feels like it happened yesterday. They're still sorting through, you know what I mean? There are a lot of progress, I don't think.
Yeah, this is a tough one, because you do have approximate height, and they can get pretty good about it. They'll use LiDAR, and you saw when the tent was out there, they were taking measurements of that front portico and everything. And so they will be able to get pretty close to how tall that person was. So that starts helping you narrow it down. I'm not looking for somebody who's 5 foot, and I'm not looking for somebody who's 7 foot, right? So I'm looking for somebody who's 5'10". Now I can go back into offender files, what they call field interview cards, FI cards, reports, intelligence reports. And then you're right. We can know it's a male. Is it a Hispanic male? Could be. Could be a dark-skinned white male. that part is a little bit iffy. But the other thing too is if the person is not from this area, and which we know from home invasions, and we know from certain traveling gangs like Tren de Aragua, when they would go out and hit high-end homes, they're not from that area. They travel, they go into an area, and then they come out. The chances of them having prior contact with law enforcement in that area is minimal. And that's the reason why it makes it hard to track these gangs, because there's nothing organic. It's not like, hey, it's the usual suspects, Johnny the gangbanger. Okay, we got him in our files. We know who it is. There's some other things you can do too. It's very problematic because of the mask. The mask makes it difficult to do. People say, well, can't you do facial recognition, or what about the eyes? Because of the infrared lighting, because of the extra coverage that's around the face, it makes it difficult to do that. You might get an idea about how far apart the eyes are. That could lead you to some really hard work, Brian. It's like recovering those videos. That was tough stuff. Another tough stuff thing is going back into Arizona DMV and pulling which they can get access to, pull all the driver's license photos and say, okay, first thing we want to do is exclude everybody who's not male, right? So now we're left with males. Now we want everybody on their driver's license who is 5'8" to 6 foot. And you can narrow it down. And then you could start doing potentially some analysis with AI. But that is a long, hard slog. So it's not as easy, and it really boils down to, was that person from that area? Do they have prior contact with law enforcement? If so, then I'm confident their information will be surfaced at some point. But Brian, it's like you pick a town you've never been to. You go in there, you commit a crime, and you leave. There is nothing in the police files that has anything about Brian Enton in there. There's nothing they will be able to do unless you left fingerprints or DNA. But if you just come in, steal a bike, put it in the back of your truck, and drive off, dude, there's just nothing there. And that may be what they're dealing with.
But what about no one recognizing him? I mean, you mentioned the reward up over $1 million. I'm just thinking, last time you and I spoke, I would have thought by now someone would want that money, or someone would make the call. Why do you think there's still nothing?
It goes back to, it could be that the person's not from that area. So the chances that somebody would see the coverage and see stuff, the farther out you go. But the other thing could be, though, too, that lends more credibility to a single offender rather than two offenders. Anytime you have two people cannot keep a secret. A secret can only be kept by one person, no matter what they say, right? But in the gang culture, in the crime culture, there is this thing about, hey, don't snitch, don't say anything to the cops, don't snitch us out. Is there somebody out there who knows? I would say so. Is there somebody out there who may think that if I say something, now I become the target? Is my life worth $1.2 million? That's a tough thing. There's no easy answer to this. I know everybody wants the hey, rationalize this for me. Give me a cohesive answer. That's the danger. When we start locking onto something that seems like it makes sense, now that becomes our frame. When I would work cases, I always told the dispatchers and other people, do not just say a death investigation. Do not say possible suicide. The minute you say possible suicide, then everything is framed through the construct of a suicide. So if you get something in that doesn't comport with it being a suicide or not a suicide, that goes outside the frame. So start with the minimum information possible and work out from there. And so in this case, it could be, the reason I said that is that everybody gets their frame. Everybody knows what they're looking for. And in this case, this guy, it could be is that it's a single person. It's a solo operator, a lone wolf, which would be consistent with the single image we saw before and then the video we saw this time. I know some other people like Jim Clemente and Dr. Bodden talk about like the blood was very close to the ground, might have been just carried out so that gives credence to a single person. So when it's a single person, two people can't keep a secret, right? But one person probably can. And if they're not from this area or far enough out, they would have to recognize, there's not enough video to recognize gait. Like if I saw you and I saw you walking, I could say, okay, that's Brian Enton. I've seen him on TV, whatever, right? But we don't have enough context for somebody to say, I recognize that guy definitively. Like I see his gait, he walks a certain way. We have the face, we kind of have the build, but we lack, if we had, maybe 30 seconds to a minute more video, that would provide more context to make it easier for people to recognize him.
Do you think all the criticism of the sheriff has been fair?
No. Look, I have no dog in the hunt. So I don't think all of it's been fair, because I think some of it comes from certain corners that don't understand how investigations work. And it is, look, you cannot manufacture things out of thin air. So it's like, well, why don't you have a suspect? Because we don't have one. Could things have been done better? Most places, especially when you have a major case. So if we think about it, that same time, the shooting, I believe it was up at Brown, the police chief up there, masterful job of how you handle it, direct communication and stuff. This will be a case study, Brian, for public information officers about this is how do you handle things. So I think there's some fair criticism, as there always is in any investigation, of how somebody handled it, how they said things. I don't think everything's fair because some of it goes to process. If you don't understand the process, then you criticize it. You don't understand. This is not TV. You don't get DNA results back in 30 minutes because a television show, a 1-hour show, is only 44 minutes long. I don't get my results back in 44 minutes. So some things take time. And if you have convoluted DNA, if you have mixed DNA, there is nothing that is at this point in time admissible in court to say, we deconvoluted that DNA. We now know for sure that between your DNA, my DNA, maybe we both were bleeding and it got mixed. There's no definitive way that has been admitted in court yet to say, that's you, that's me. We've been able to separate the DNA completely. So there's a lot of scientific things that people don't understand that give rise to the criticism. But as with anything, there'll be the issues. Did they call in the FBI? Director Patel has one story. Sheriff has another. The record speaks for itself on things like that.
Do you think the guy could be dead in the doorbell camera?
I don't know. That's I put that when I talk about types of things that are known, that's unknowable at this point. We don't know. Is it permanently unknowable? That's a different statement. We don't know. At some point when something happens and you like evidence is erased away, it's permanently unknowable. No amount of investigation will go back and recreate that evidence that was lost. So in this case, I can't answer that. What you can do is, what do we know factually, right? We know factually it hasn't been identified yet, or at least not publicly. The reward hasn't tipped the scale. There's no indication, even though there's some tradecraft that indicates the Mexican carry, the way the pistol is, that's a term of art down there, that it could be from South Tucson, or, you're not too far away from the border. Are some of those things plausible? But those are all hypotheses that have to be tested, and you have to test it against reality, physics, the time constraints, right? So if, for example, I think, like I said, the process of holding onto the vehicles and waiting for something to appear is inverted. What I would do instead, I would take, here's the vehicles I know within a 5-mile radius. How many of those vehicles, what you can do is start eliminating things. I know when you were down there, Brian, you drove across the border. You said, how long would it take? Well, guess what they have down there? They got cameras. So if I see the same vehicle in the neighborhood crossing that within the appropriate time frame, I mean, you could not leave Nancy Guthrie's house and be across the border in 15 minutes. Physically impossible. We're not flying jet fighters here. But if it was an hour and a half later, that's plausible, right? So I think what you have to do is take what you have, put your time constraints around it, and start working it from there to say, what vehicles that were in this area also cross the border? Now, I will tell you, if it crossed the border, and you know this from being down there, we do get cooperation from the Mexican officials, but there is a different culture about investigations and about accountability and working with American law enforcement in Mexico than there is in some other countries.
Really appreciate Morgan for taking the time to talk with me. I really appreciate you guys for following along, for subscribing, for sticking it out with me with all these little updates. I still really hope and that there'll be justice for Nancy. I still believe that something's going to come through. I really do. What the sheriff said about, he seems hopeful about the DNA still. So if anybody has any information, call 1-800-CALL-FBI. Keep the family, in your thoughts. Obviously, the Guthries, I know we get all wrapped up in the investigation and all these news stories, but think about what they're going through. And again, I appreciate you guys. Appreciate you guys for supporting my channel and for subscribing. I'm going to be headed to New York City and going to be filling in for Chris Cuomo on News Nation. He's going to be off the beginning of next week. So, but I'll stay on top of everything. I'll have some new episodes for you guys. And again, I appreciate you guys. Hope everybody has a great weekend. And I'll talk to you guys later.
fine.
She's over, Leanie is tired. Sitting and sassing is really hard. White hair has dark black mascara's gone away. Now y'all go start on with dinner. Two chicks and a pawn, maybe fire it up soon. Manager is Maggie will load up on you. Say goodbye now, go on, go away. We'll meet back here, it'll all be okay. Go away fruitcakes. Go away fruitcakes. Go away boss. According to Leanie, into a big hug. Show's over, Leanie is tired. Sitting and sassing is really hard. White hair has gone black, mascara's gone away. Now y'all go start on with your day. Two chicks and a pawn, maybe fire it up soon. Manager is Maggie will love on you. Go away. We'll meet back here and we'll all be okay. Go away fruitcakes. Go away fruitcakes. Go away bugs. According to Leanie, gives you a big hug.